Chapter 453. Eternal Tree? Hearing Wang Lu's question, Zhou Mumu was taken aback. In the battle for the 5 blood spirit crown, the 5 lead disciples all had their own gains. Some were like Qiong Hua, who sacrificed the blood of hundreds of millions of living beings to the kill immortal sword, and thus had a closer connection with the immortal treasure. Others were like Zhou Mumu, who inherited the blood-marked divine spear, which contained infinite mysteries. Of course, the gains of the 5 were different. For example, Qiong Hua and Wang Lu were the biggest winners, while Zhou Mumu obtained the blood-marked divine spear. As for Zhan Zai, it was gratifying that he had achieved the 10,000 motionless immortal heart realm, but compared with the others, he did not gain much. Zhou Mumu was naturally overjoyed, but she did not expect that Zhan Zai, after all, was the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques. How could he be as useless as she thought? He had quietly harvested the seed of the eternal tree. Seeing his secret being exposed, Zhan Zai was a little curious. "How did you know?" Wang Lu said, "Because I saw the lush greenery on top of senior brother Zai's head, which reminded me of that towering ancient tree." "Lush greenery?" Zhan Zai inexplicably asked, and then carefully looked at it. "Is there still a flaw in my cultivation method, causing the aura of the eternal tree to be unable to perfectly integrate?" As he spoke, Zhan Zai released more than 300 arithmetic talismans and began to calculate the problem with his cultivation method design, completely ignoring the 4 lead disciples of one of the 5 uniques who had deliberately come here. "Well, it has nothing to do with senior brother Zai's cultivation method," Wang Lu explained. "It's because when I was communicating with my pen friend Hai Yunfan some time ago, he told me that he had recently found a girlfriend. For this reason, I specially gave him a small profit, the Black Jade Diamond Dragon Tiger pill that I personally concocted, and then personally endorsed by the 7th elder of my humble sect." Zhan Zai's eyes lit up. Junior brother Wang Lu personally concocted this pill? What is its use? What new technology does it use, and what kind of breakthrough does it have compared to other pills? Just like the literal meaning, it makes people as black and hard as the Kunlun slaves. "TSK, your focus is completely wrong. I'm talking about Hai Yunfan." Zhan Zai frowned. "Junior brother Yunfan? I haven't seen him for a while, but what does he have to do with my lush greenery?" "It's nothing. It's just that his new girlfriend is Yi Feifei." "Junior sister Yi? Because her cultivation speed can't keep up with mine, we haven't contacted each other for a while. But what does she have to do with the lush greenery?" Zhan Zai was still puzzled, his brows tightly knitted together. If it was anyone else who spoke like this, he would have long since determined that this person's intelligence was not worthy of communicating with him. However, when it came to Wang Lu, his heart was filled with fear, and every word and action had to be carefully considered. Little did she know that Wang Lu was already shocked by Zhan Zai at this time. Back then, Yi Feifei was infatuated with Zhan Zai, but in the end, senior brother Zhan did not even have the slightest impression of her. "Senior brother Zai, your sect's 10,000 motionless immortal heart is indeed worthy to be called an immortal-level cultivation method. I'm convinced that besides becoming an immortal, there's probably no other way to cultivate this cultivation method." Wang Lu shook his head. "At the same time, I also understand why your sect's female puppet could be invented. Your asexual reproduction technology will mature sooner or later, right?" Zhan Zai casually said. "There is indeed a main research team that is advancing this project, but forget it, it seems that you don't want to say more about this. In short, my eternal tree has indeed sprouted in my jade mansion. Some time ago, I found that it showed signs of breaking out of the ground, so I put down everything and focused on this. Fortunately, although it was a few days late, there was finally a result." With that, Zhan Zai's face raised a scholarly smile, proud and reserved. Zhou Mumu, on the other hand, couldn't be reserved. She took a step forward and stomped her foot, causing Zhan Zai's residence to tremble. "In short, because of your personal affairs, you stood us up for a whole day? Personal affairs?" Zhan Zai sneered and said with an expression that said, "I don't expect you, a woman from Kunlun immortal world, whose brain has been rigid, to understand the great significance of my academic research. I'll just say one thing. The combination of the eternal tree and my king pill will bring great convenience to our trip to the demon world. Although I'm late for a day, I've made a greater contribution to the team. On the other hand, What else can you do besides arriving at the gathering place on time? Without waiting for Zhou Mumu's anger to erupt, Zhanzai said, we previously planned the trip to the demon world. And in these 3 months we each digested our inheritance. I believe that we've also done special training for the various situations when we encounter the demon race in the future. But have you ever considered a basic question? How can we reach the demon world? The passage between 9 regions and the demon world has long been sealed. Even if there are occasional omissions, it's not something that we, the Taoist master of King Pil, can easily pass through. But I can rely on this eternal tree to find the opportunity to connect the 2 worlds. Zhanzai said, slightly release the aura of the eternal tree, and then explain, the eternal tree is the most precious treasure of the demon world. It has the ability to penetrate through the sky and the earth. What we saw in the group of immortal tombs is just a miniature version that has been weakened by God knows how many times. The real eternal tree has the infinite power that is comparable to no beyond a true immortal. And the eternal tree has the ability to sense each of its separated branches, leaves, and fruits. And now I've combined the seed of the eternal tree with the King Pil. So as a part of the eternal tree, I can summon the main body, and then go against the current to enter the demon world. Of course, in the process I can also take the 4 of you with me. How about it with my contribution, let alone being late for a day or 2, even if I'm late for a month, so what? Without me, could you guys arrive at the gathering place on time to enter the demon world? After Zhanzai fused with the eternal tree, his self-confidence had obviously improved. However, before the smile on his face faded, he heard Zhou Mumu's cold humph. What are you showing off for? You think you're so great just because you can enter the demon world? Upon hearing Zhou Mumu's words, Wang Lu suddenly smiled and said, it seems that without accident, the chances that we got in Kunlun Library are almost the same. The chance to enter the demon world. Qianghua nodded. There are hundreds of millions of souls of the demon world in the Kill Immortal Sword. And it's natural for the souls of the demon world to return to the demon world. I can open the endless void, and then use the souls of the demon world as a guide to go to the demon world. Xiang Liang let out a sound of agreement. Although he didn't explain it, it also supported Wang Lu's speculation. He also got the chance to go to the demon world in the library. Wang Lu said, it seems that whether it's South Pole Immortal Wang or Dixian in the group of immortal tombs, they don't seem to be very optimistic that the 5 of us can come together. Therefore, each of them gave the chance to go to the demon world, so as not to concentrate the key to the door in one person's hand. As a result, because of various reasons, the 5 of us can't gather in the demon world. At the same time, this shows that they are determined to make us go to the demon world. However, being able to have the seed of the eternal tree, and become a part of the eternal tree is still a very important achievement. Once we enter the demon world, we can use this to conceal our human aura and avoid unnecessary disputes. No matter how strong the lead disciples of the 5 uniques were, it was impossible for them to fight head-on with the local people in the demon world alone. The strength of Taoist Master King Pil was not that high. Once he encountered the demon king of the demon world, let alone the 5 lead disciples, even 50 of them would not be enough to be killed by the other party. Therefore, being able to become a local creature of the demon world was indeed a very important thing. Did you hear that? The barbarian woman of Kunlun sect? With the support of Wang Lu and the others, Zhanzai's arrogance was even more flourishing. His eyes were filled with disdain, as if he wanted to trample Zhou Mumu under his feet. How could Zhou Mumu bear it? Seeing that the 2 of them were about to fight, Wang Lu reached out to stop Zhou Mumu. Senior Sister Zhou, the overall situation is important. Zhou Mumu was not polite at all. Why don't you let him think about the overall situation? Wang Lu glanced at Zhanzai with pity in his eyes, and then whispered to Zhou Mumu about the story between Hai Yunfan, Yi Feifei and Zhanzai. In just a few words, Zhou Mumu's anger dissipated, and her face was full of smiles. Ha ha ha. No wonder you said he was overflowing with green. It turns out there's such a story. Well, why bother with this kind of person who is doomed to be alone for a lifetime? I'll let him have it this time. Wang Lu cupped his hands across his chest. Senior Sister Zhou is really magnanimous. Zhanzai was inexplicable. When he heard Zhou Mumu mention that he was doomed to be alone for a lifetime, it seemed like she was praising him as a genius. Unparalleled in the 9 regions, seeking defeat alone. But looking at her sarcastic and compassionate smile, he felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell what it was. After thinking about it, Zhang Zai felt that with his talent, why should he bother to understand the thinking of the Kunlun barbarian? She could say whatever she wanted to say. This kind of barbaric and rude person would only be left with the secular life of being a good wife and educating children. However, thinking of her barbaric and rude behavior, which completely did not meet the traditional requirements of virtue for a woman in 9 regions, she probably wouldn't be able to get married. This is what it means to be truly doomed to be alone for a lifetime. Thinking of this, Zhang Zai cast a victorious look at her. Zhou Mumu naturally did not show any weakness and responded with the same victorious look. Wang Lu frowned. Why don't you two stay together? In any case, since Zhang Zai had provided an acceptable reason for being late, the 4 of them did not intend to be entangled for too long. After all, the plan to go to the demon world could not be delayed. Except for Wang Lu. The other 4 didn't even completely explain the trip to the demon world to their sections. This gathering was also invited by Qianghua in her own name, saying that she wanted to hold a small gathering. Then, the elders of the various sects thought that it was not a bad thing to deepen the relationship between the 5 uniques, so they allowed it. If the time dragged on, it would inevitably cause trouble. Therefore, after some discussion, it was decided that Zhang Zai would personally open the passage to the demon world. As for the location, naturally it could not be chosen in the 10,000 Arts sect, because once the aura of the eternal tree spread, it was likely to lead to unnecessary trouble. Although the great war of immortal and demon had ended more than 2,000 years ago, it was rumored that many reclusive cultivators had been lurking in the deep mountains and forests, vigilant against the counterattack of the demon race. If they rashly released the eternal tree, it was likely that they would be regarded as spies of the demon world and would be beheaded. That group of old guys was not inferior to South Pole immortal Wang, so it was not unusual for them to be killed. After discussing for a while, they could not come to a conclusion. Finally, it was Qianghua who made the final decision. I have an immortal cave in the southern heaven region, which is the spiritual energy node of the feng shui line. The spiritual energy outside the immortal cave rapidly changes, which should be able to conceal the aura of the eternal tree. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu's eyes were almost blinded. Immortal cave in the southern heaven region? Moreover, it's the spiritual energy node of the feng shui line? This is enough to establish a sect. Where did you get such a mansion? Qianghua faintly smiled. When I became the King Pill, the mysterious sky mansion gave it to me as a gift to sow good karma. Wang Lu gritted his teeth and then smiled. Mysterious sky mansion? We've become enemies. Chapter 454. Don't worry about scarcity, worry about inequality. The relationship between Wang Lu and the mysterious sky mansion has always been good. Not only did he have a VIP account, the cooperation between the Intelligence Revenue Service and the mysterious sky mansion has also been increasing in recent years. Therefore, every festival the mysterious sky mansion would send people to send gifts. Some were local specialties, some were meticulously made. And although not powerful, they were all kinds of interesting magical tools. Wang Lu has always praised the mysterious sky mansion's service awareness. For the lead disciple of the 5 uniques, wealth in the general sense has no meaning, and with the sect's resources, it was not surprising for them to receive spiritual treasures and even immortal treasures. The advantage of the mysterious sky mansion compared to the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League was nothing more than their large number of people. They were spread all over the 9 regions, so it was more convenient to collect local specialties from some remote areas. And the mysterious sky mansion just happened to play this comparative advantage every time they could send Wang Lu a gift. All along, Wang Lu was deeply satisfied with this, especially compared to the treatment of him and his master in the mysterious sky mansion. It was like heaven and earth. Taoist Master Wang Wu has long been blacklisted by the mysterious sky mansion because of excessive loans. Considering that she was an elder of the 5 uniques, the amount owed was not too much, so the mysterious sky mansion was too lazy to care about it. However, every year they would send a bill to remind someone that they still owed a lot of spirit stones, which made Wang Wu very annoyed. Wang Lu has always been proud of his VIP treatment, but now, right in front of him, a woman from Shangjing sect named Qianghua, who was as incompatible as fire and water with him, actually showed off in such a blatant way that his dog eyes hurt. Mysterious Sky Mansion actually gave Qianghua a set of Southern Heaven Immortal Cave to celebrate her promotion to King Pill? It was just a mere Qianghua. Was it necessary? Was it that rare? Take Lu Li as an example. In terms of age, Qianghua was a few years older than Lu Li, obviously an old woman. In terms of appearance, although the two were objectively on par, Qianghua had a lofty and repulsive face, so her appearance index must be reduced by half. In terms of figure, Qianghua could also be considered as curvaceous, but the two on her chest could only be compared to Lu Li's. In terms of IQ, Lu Li was even more superior. What was the use of a woman as smart as Qianghua? In terms of cultivation base, Qianghua was half a step ahead. However, Lu Li was also on the verge of a breakthrough. With her brilliant sword heart, once she advanced to the King Pill stage, she would basically lock the title of #1 in terms of attack power among her peers. On this point, even Wang Lu, who had primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi, had to admit that he was somewhat inferior to her. Therefore, in summary, Qianghua was nothing but the kill immortal sword. How could a good-for-nothing person enjoy the South Heaven Immortal Cave? Those grandsons of the Mysterious Sky Mansion only knew how to give him some toys that didn't hurt him, but they were willing to give Qianghua a villa. Was Qianghua a mistress of the Mysterious Sky Mansion? Unfortunately, the important matter of going to the demon world was more important, so Wang Lu had no time to consider how to protest against the differential treatment of the Mysterious Sky Mansion. Since Qianghua had proposed a suitable place, the five of them flew in the air using their respective magical treasures. In order to avoid attracting attention, the more convenient and faster Shangjing sex transportation network could not be used. Along the way, in order to maintain team harmony, the five of them deliberately spent a lot of effort. Because Wang Lu and Qianghua were hostile to each other, the two of them naturally could not stick together. Zhou Mumu and Zhan Zai were like fire and water, so they had to be separated. As for Xiang Liang, it didn't matter. However, his relationship with anyone was relatively cold. His cold face seemed to keep everyone at a distance. Therefore, this flight process was really awkward. Initially, Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu were companions, talking and laughing wittily, but the other three simply couldn't group up. Zhan Zai looked down on the barbarians of the royal soldier sect, but his relationship with Qianghua was quite delicate after the five spirits' power struggle. Qianghua was a person with the temperament of a leader. As long as she took the initiative to come forward, it was not difficult to coordinate the relationship between the several people. However, with the presence of Wang Lu, she didn't want to be too conspicuous, so as to avoid trouble. Therefore, in addition to Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu, the other three people unexpectedly ignored each other and remained silent. This team state, let alone sincere cooperation, seemed like they were going to disband at any time. If it was only this, then it was fine. However, after flying for a while, Zhan Zai couldn't bear the loneliness anymore. Especially when he saw Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu laughing all the way. He secretly frowned. Among these five people, the only one who could make him feel like a confidant was Wang Lu. Although their relationship was not good, Zhan Zai was more afraid of Wang Lu. Zhan Zai despised Zhou Mumu, but he very much agreed with Wang Lu. Therefore, when he saw the two of them talking and laughing all the way, he thought, this Zhou Mumu really knows how to climb high branches. Knowing that her intelligence is low, she looked for a strong person like Wang Lu. She actually knows how to use a woman as a weapon. But I won't let her get away with it so easily. Wang Lu's precious time should not be squandered on a woman with an empty brain. The one who is really worth his time to talk to is me, Zhan Zai. Thinking of this, Zhan Zai made a decision. He flew directly to Wang Lu's side, completely ignoring the conversation between Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu, and very stiffly interjected, Wang Lu, I have a question to discuss with you. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu gawked for a moment, but then he immediately guessed Zhan Zai's mind and almost laughed on the spot. However, Zhou Mumu was not so easy to talk to. She stared at him with her pretty eyes. Who the F***ck are you? Zhan Zai simply ignored her. He just looked at Wang Lu seriously and then put on a formal smile. This question is about my 10,000 art sex 4 phases pill condensation technique. You should have seen my junior brothers and sisters use it on the way here. At present, it seems that the result of this spell is highly random. You use the same amount of magical power input, but the result can't be determined. Regarding this, Before he could finish his question, he was angrily interrupted by Zhou Mumu. Moreover, the way the girl interrupted him was particularly direct. The blood-marked divine spear was placed vertically in front of Zhang Zai, and the girl coldly said, "Get lost." Zhang Zai was also angry, thinking, "This woman, I give you face but you don't want it?" Thereupon, he also activated his lightning body. Seeing that the dispute was imminent, Wang Lu sighed. "Sure enough, you two should be together. Every time you meet, it's like a thunderstorm. How about this, you two fight first? As long as you don't lose your life and don't cause irreparable damage, you can fight however you want until the outcome is decided. Then the winner will have to admit whatever the loser says." "That's exactly what I want," the two of them said in unison, and then the fight officially began. The blood-marked divine spear and the lightning body fought each other, stirring up a storm. Interestingly, the two of them were fighting while hurrying on their way, because Wang Lu and Xianghua would not stop and wait for them. After noticing this, Zhou Mumu rushed to change her tactic. Instead of trying to hurt the opponent, she just wanted to trap the opponent so that Zhang Zai would fall behind. Of course, she didn't really want to exclude him from the team. After all, they still needed to count on his eternal tree to go to the demon world. However, as long as she could stall him once, how could Zhang Zai, who would rush over later, say that he didn't lose? And as long as he admitted defeat, then since Zhou Mumu had such a plan, Zhang Zai's plan was of course similar. Therefore, the spells that the two of them used were mainly to delay. Sometimes Zhang Zai would draw the ninth heaven thunder and draw the thunder lock cage. Sometimes, Zhou Mumu would use the diamond ring to bind the space, wanting to take Zhang Zai into the ring. The fight was wonderful and eye-opening. Then, taking advantage of this opportunity, the bored Wang Lu found Xiang Liang and began to discuss military issues with the latter. As soon as Wang Lu opened his mouth, Xiang Liang's eyes began to shine. This was the field he was most interested in. In addition, Wang Lu's attainments in the military field also made Xiang Liang particularly satisfied. Very good. But compared to a real expert such as himself, there was still a gap. This gave Xiang Liang a lot of room to play. The two could discuss any problem, and every time they discussed, Xiang Liang could show his strong points. From time to time, Wang Lu would burst out with inspiration, which made Xiang Liang often feel enlightened. This kind of exchange simply made Xiang Liang feel refreshed, and he even remembered a legendary story he heard in the royal soldier sect. It was a story that Xiang Liang accidentally heard when several outer court disciples were secretly chatting. They were discussing a strange creature called a woman. They said that men and women could obtain great pleasure through an act called sexual intercourse. Even the pleasure of advancing to a higher realm and winning a war could not compare to the pleasure of intercourse between a man and a woman. At that time, Xiang Liang snorted disdainfully. "Are you kidding me? Is there anything more pleasurable in the world than winning a war and advancing in cultivation base? That's because you haven't been promoted much and you haven't won many battles, right?" A group of unworthy outer court disciples. But now, Xiang Liang suddenly remembered that story. Of course, it was not because he had any bad intentions toward Wang Lu, although he had also heard the story of a certain stellar fairy. The main reason was that Xiang Liang suddenly discovered that there seemed to be some things in the world that were comparable to the pleasure of advancing in cultivation and winning a war. This almost refreshed Xiang Liang's worldview. It made him surprised and greatly changed his view of Wang Lu. Previously, their short exchange in the 5 Blood Spirit Crown competition only gave Xiang Liang a preliminary understanding of Wang Lu. But now, he felt that his understanding of Wang Lu was still insufficient. No one had told him before that Wang Lu was such an interesting person. People only said that Wang Lu was a wonderful flower in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, and that no one could match his talent in strategy, but no one said that chatting with him would make people so happy. Seeing Xiang Liang's eyes getting brighter and brighter, Wang Lu also sneered in his heart. Sure enough, this kind of young virgin's favorability was the easiest to brush. If one wanted to brush the favorability of a young virgin, there were only 2 ways: talk and talk. One was to talk and the other was to talk in detail. And now, Wang Lu was fully using his eloquence to brush Xiang Liang's favorability all the way until it almost broke the surface. Wang Lu was very clear about the principle of having more friends, but in his opinion, most people did not have the qualification to be friends. However, the lead disciples of the 5 uniques were undoubtedly the ones who could be friends. And in this trip to the demon world, this flight was the last relaxing time. The 5 lead disciples were all battle-hardened, so they had long been prepared for the battle, so there was no need to sharpen their spears at the last minute. Since there was nothing to do along the way, it was better to brush the favorability of the lead disciples. In fact, Wang Lu had long locked on Xiang Liang as his target. Unfortunately, he had been busy chatting with Zhou Mumu and had no time to spare. Thanks to Zhang Zai's timely intervention, Wang Lu was freed. Looking at the 2 people who were still fighting behind him, Wang Lu's smile was even brighter. The 2 of you shall be together forever. Chapter 455. After half a day, a group of 5 people, 2 of whom were injured, finally arrived at the Immortals' Cave in the southern heaven region. Qionghua's Immortal Cave was located in a beautiful place, with a floating island floating in the middle of the mountains. Below the floating island was a ring, a magnificent ring. Outside the ring was a mirror-like lake. The surface of the water reflected layers of verdant mountains, like a paradise on earth. However, at the edge of the ring, the situation took a sharp turn. Sleep seemed to have been neatly cut by a knife. The terrain suddenly fell steeply, and the flat surface of the lake turned into a cliff. The lake water surged down, forming a ring-shaped waterfall. After the turbulent water fell for thousands of feet, it gathered in one place, and the powerful momentum caused the water to shatter like mist. The floating island was shrouded in mist, like a huge steamer, using steam to support the floating island. However, compared to this magnificent natural scene, the intense changes in heaven and earth spiritual chi here were more worthy of attention. The circular waterfall around the floating island had a strange gravitational force, causing the heaven and earth spiritual chi here to be abnormally active. Not only the water spiritual chi, but the other 4 attributes of spiritual chi also existed between heaven and earth. Moreover, they were evenly distributed, mixing and blending with each other, vibrating fiercely, mincing all kinds of energy and forming a natural barrier. Cultivating in seclusion in this kind of environment, there was no need to worry about the fluctuation of magical power spreading out, and there was no need to worry about being disturbed by someone who happened to pass by. This was because outside of the circular waterfall, the mirror-like lake had the effect of concealing all changes and diverting the attention of outsiders. To put it simply, under normal circumstances, unless one knew about this place beforehand, they would unconsciously divert their attention elsewhere, unable to lock onto this floating island. Furthermore, the higher one's cultivation was, the easier it was for a cultivator to be misled by the spiritual chi in the earth veins. If it were not for Qionghua's special artifact leading the way, the group would not have been able to reach this place. At the same time, the dramatic changes in this place could also be called the wonder of the 9 regions. The drastic changes in the surrounding spiritual energy were infinitely useful to the talented cultivators, and many magical techniques could be cultivated with the help of this. This was a true heavenly sanctuary, a treasure land that was more than enough for a middle-rank academy to establish. At the same time, it was also a gift from the mysterious sky mansion to Qionghuo for the king pill. We're here. This is my cave abode. It's been a long journey. Let's go in and have a rest. Next to the floating island, Qionghuo said lightly. Her eyes were indifferent, without any intention of showing off. However, by chance her gaze fell on Wang Lu. The latter frowned and his eyes flickered. After a long time, when Qionghuo had some doubts, he suddenly spoke. Senior apprentice Sister Qionghuo, are you selling this house? 30 million spirit stones, what do you think? 40 million. Qionghuo helplessly said. I think these things should at least wait until we come back. Wang Lu said confidently, I'm afraid that if you die in the demon world, the mysterious sky mansion will take back this item. It won't be easy for me to buy it at a low price. Qionghuo shook her head and did not discuss this with Wang Lu. She just waved her hand and opened a gap in the natural barrier formed by the circular waterfall. Let's go. The 5 of them entered the floating island one after another and rested in the island's exquisite courtyard to replenish their magic power. Then, led by Qionghuo, they flew to the bottom of the floating island. Below the floating island was the rising mist of the circular waterfall. Qionghuo pointed at the center of the mist. Junior apprentice Brother Zai, you just need to plant the eternal tree here. However, Zhanzai was not assured. He summoned out hundreds of calculation talismans, and after carefully calculating it, reluctantly nodded. Transplanting an eternal tree that had been rooted in the king pill was a matter of life and death for a cultivator. Even in common sense, it was simply a fantasy. Fortunately, Zhanzai was a disciple of the 10,000 Arts sect, so he was able to calculate this possibility through his own unique algorithm. However, the difficulty was very high, and the environmental requirements were also extremely harsh. No matter how proud Zhanzai was of his method, he would not joke around with his life. Next, Zhanzai laid an array under the island and began to transplant the eternal tree. The other 4 lead disciples guarded him from the side. Each of them operated the king pill to filter the surrounding spiritual energy so that Zhanzai, who was in the middle, could breathe the purest air. The surrounding spiritual energy filtered by the 4 top-quality king pills was a natural supplement. Zhanzai didn't even need to deliberately operate his method. With one breath, the king pill in his jade mansion would be filled with inexhaustible magical power, and he himself was able to focus on the eternal tree transplant. On the first day, Zhanzai sat cross-legged in midair, supported by a floating futon. He devoted all his energy to absorbing the pure spiritual energy provided by the 4 lead disciples. One day later, the king pill in his jade mansion expanded 10 times, and its magical power was almost violent. For the cultivators of the king pill, overcharging the king pill with spiritual energy was a naked suicide. Usually, a cultivator only needed to inject 1.5 times the amount of spiritual energy to make the king pill explode. Zhanzai's 10 times pressure was simply an eye-opener. However, only in this environment could he really begin to transplant the eternal tree. The green light in the king pill began to grow rapidly under the washing of the excessive spiritual energy. The next day, Zhanzai was still sitting in midair, but the futon under him had disappeared. Because from the pores on his body, countless fine roots of the eternal tree spread out and took root at the bottom of the waterfall. And under the nourishment of the waterfall, these tens of thousands of roots supported Zhanzai's body. On the 3rd day, Zhanzai's position had been replaced by a towering ancient tree. A giant tree with a waist of more than 300 meters was suspended in mid-air. The tens of thousands of roots that supported it were no longer fine and difficult to see with the naked eye, but rather unusually thick channels. These channels were responsible for the close connection between the eternal tree and the ring-shaped waterfall. The tens of thousands of channels intertwined into a net, almost covering the ring-shaped waterfall. And looking up along the roots, originally, Zhanzai was sitting quietly under the floating island, only several hundred meters away from the bottom of the island. According to the growth speed of the eternal tree, the crown would soon reach the island. However, at this time when the eternal tree began to take shape, looking up from below, the floating island seemed to have disappeared. Because the space channel had been opened by the eternal tree. If seen from a distance, the bottom of the floating island was like a black hole, and most of the thick trunk of the eternal tree was submerged in the black hole. Inside the black hole, the cold wind whistled, bringing with it an uncomfortable smell. It was the smell of the demon world. The 4 lead disciples of the 4 protectors looked solemnly at the black hole above their heads. Although they had been looking forward to this scene for a long time, witnessing it with their own eyes was still incredible. The channel through the 2 worlds was actually opened. According to Zhanzai's theory, this was the summon of the demon world's eternal tree to its branch, which was the instinctive reaction of the eternal tree. However, just an instinctive reaction of the eternal tree could tear the space and open the space seal that was finally laid by the 9 regions cultivators in the past. It seemed that a life form beyond the level of true immortal was not an unfounded fantasy. However, thinking that there was such a terrifying life form in the demon world, how could they not be deeply worried? In the 5 blood spirit crown power struggle, although Zhanzai's plan to make the eternal tree stand tall on the ground was only a part of the immortal dreamland of the group of immortal tombs, who could guarantee that there was no powerful person in the real demon world who could do this? Tens of thousands of years ago, in the first great war of immortals and demons, the 9 regions, which was in its heyday, was set off a reign of terror by the demon race, which fully illustrated the power of the demon race. And for thousands of years, heroes emerged in large numbers in 9 regions, which could give birth to heroes like Immortal Qin and Great Ancestor Disheng. Could it be that the demon world could not have a ghost beast king? Once the eternal tree was really used, perhaps there would be a force of the same level in 9 regions that could compete with it. However, how serious would the collision of these two forces bring to 9 regions? I feel more and more that this trip to the demon world should not be delayed. Zhou Mumu looked extremely serious. Xiang Liang nodded silently, and his murderous intent gradually revealed itself. However, Wang Lu said, I want to call for help. Qianghua shook her head. You should be very clear that the more people involved in this trip to the demon world, the more efficient it is. Moreover, this passage does not allow too strong an individual to pass through. The level of King Pill is almost the limit. Wang Lu said, I happen to know a King Pill level B****, who is very suitable to be used as cannon fodder, cannon in various senses. Qianghua sighed and no longer paid attention to Wang Lu. She lightly said, let's go. With that, she flew into the black hole first. Wang Lu chuckled and followed closely behind. Zhou Mumu and Xiang Liang followed side by side. The next moment, the eternal tree, which was deeply rooted in the ring-shaped waterfall and nourished by the waterfall, suddenly abandoned all its roots and disappeared under the strong gravitational force behind the black hole. That terrifying black hole slowly closed, and countless spots of starlight flickered in it, like pairs of covetous and longing eyes. Behind the passage was a blood-red world. This was a world that was not unfamiliar to people. At the last moment of the battle for the 5 blood spirit crown, when Qianghua unleashed the Kill Immortal sword and launched a world-breaking blow, the world changed color and all living things declined. The camouflage that was attached to that world was broken, and everything was revealed. Harmony River, Flaming Valley, Golden City, Gray Mountain were not beautiful places, but the ugly and cruel land of the demon world for the people of 9 regions. And then it looked like what they saw in front of them. Is this the demon world? After coming out of the passage, Zhou Mumu's eyes widened and she softly asked, this is the demon world. Behind her, Zhanzai affirmed. At this time, he had just returned to his human form from the eternal tree and looked very weak. However, he stubbornly refused Xiang Liang's offer of help, proudly stood alone, and commented on the scene in front of him. Whether it is the composition of the soil under the feet or the smell of the air, they all confirm with many records that this is the demon world. His voice was weak but firm. However, just as he said that, a cold wind blew. Zhanzai involuntarily trembled and sneezed. What he spurted out was black blood. Chapter 456. Achoo! After a crisp sneeze, Zhanzai absent-mindedly looked at the black blood on his palm. The 4 lead disciples around him also cast their eyes on him. Junior brother Zai. Did you get hurt when you transplanted the eternal tree? Qianghua earnestly asked. Zhanzai didn't answer. He just looked solemnly and scanned his body with his primordial spirit to confirm his physical condition. Everything was fine, there was nothing unusual. It was as if the black blood that he just spurted out didn't belong to him. If not for the clear evidence on his palm, he would even suspect that it was an illusion. At this time, another cold wind blew. This time, not only Zhanzai, even Zhou Mumu couldn't help but sneeze. However, she didn't spurt out blood. It was just that after the girl covered her mouth and nose with her hand, she saw that there was a layer of mucus on her palm. What is this? Puzzled, Zhou Mumu shook her hand to get rid of the thick liquid droplets. Then she also scanned her body with her primordial spirit, but nothing unusual happened. However, at the same time, Wang Lu's face suddenly changed. This scene was so familiar. 3 months ago, when he received the Elder's rotation training on Spirit Sword Mountain, the first lesson that the 6th Elder gave him seemed to be this scene. It was a strange poison from the demon world. After being poisoned, everything seemed to be normal. No matter what method was used to scan the body, it would show that everything was normal. However, the whole body was constantly melting. The poison was so penetrating that even the non-phase golden body could not resist it. At the same time, no elixir could work, and only a special detoxification method could be used to survive. At that time, Wang Lu still thought, giving me such a sharp poison in the first lesson is just a show of strength, isn't it a bit boring? However, in the next 3 months, the endless difficulties of the 6th Elder finally made Wang Lu realize what it meant by There is heaven beyond heaven, and hell difficulty. In those 3 months, Wang Lu felt like he had degenerated from a spirit stone adventurer to a free adventurer, which was simply too horrible to look at. However, it was also because of those 3 months of special training that he made the correct response in the first place. Everyone except for Chonghua. Immediately activate your healing techniques and circulate them at full power. Do not hold back, this is a matter of life and death. At this time, even without Wang Lu saying anything, they had already guessed that they were poisoned. Although they did not know who poisoned them, the symptoms were beginning to appear, and the consequences seemed to be very serious. Zhou Mumu's cheeks had obviously begun to melt, but no matter what method he used to investigate, he couldn't find the source of the problem. The few chief disciples who were used to seeing storms couldn't help but feel their hair stand on end. Fortunately, it seemed that Wang Lu was very experienced in this. The only problem was, why apart from senior sister Chonghua? Zhou Mumu tried her best to operate the Kunlun longevity technique, trying to slow down the melting of her body, while looking at Chonghua with an unconvinced expression. Chonghua's strength was above her, this point she admitted, but that was because she was not good at frontal combat. When it came to longevity, as the lead disciple of the oldest sect in 9 regions, she was confident that she would not lose to anyone. Even Wang Lu's non-phase golden body could not be compared with the secret method of Kunlun sect in terms of poison avoidance, exorcism, and longevity. So why was Chonghua superior? At the same time, Chonghua was also curious as to why she was different. Although her symptoms were slightly lighter than the others, the fine beads of sweat on her forehead showed that her condition was not optimistic. As a result, Wang Lu's answer almost caused Zhou Mumu's method to go astray. Because I don't feel distressed if she dies. Chonghua secretly sighed and immediately operated the Shangjing Immortal method, using the 3-in-1 technique to highly condense her body. Next, the 4 lead disciples tried their best to delay the corrosion of the poison, while Wang Lu, after stabilizing his own condition, began to detoxify the poison for the other 4. The method used was exactly the same as the one taught by Elder Lu Li. In fact, there was no room for error. Lu Li's detoxification technique was completely piled up with human lives, and so far the principle of it could not be analyzed. And since the principle could not be analyzed, it could not be changed in the slightest. The magical power output rhythm and attribute combination must be accurate to the point that it would stun the common king pill. In particular, it must be calculated through a set of very complex formulas for the poisoned person. This kind of thing was difficult for the common Taoist master of Yuanying stage, and there were not many people in 9 regions who could do it in the king pill stage. Therefore, at this time the several lead disciples were glad to have a teammate like Wang Lu. Otherwise, when the super elite team of 5 lead disciples arrived in the demon world, before they even had the time to encounter the enemy, they would be blown to death by a gust of chilly wind. This was probably the most shameful scene that the people of 9 regions encountered since the end of the Great War of Immortal and Demon. But then again, if it weren't for the fact that the 5 of them had a tacit understanding before they separated at Kunlun Mountain that they would perform their respective duties in the next action, the preparation work of the other 4 in the past 3 months would also be adjusted, so that they would not be defenseless against the sudden poison. Among the 5 of them, Wang Lu was the best at defense. Therefore, his position in the team was the defender, and the work of resisting external damage was the responsibility of Wang Lu. This chilly wind came so suddenly that Wang Lu was unprepared for it. Because before this, Elder Lu Li also said that this kind of body-melting poison was intentional, not the natural scenery of the demon world. No matter how cruel the demon world was, it would not be so lifeless. According to the available information, the last time a cultivator from 9 regions entered the demon world was more than 1,000 years ago. During this period, the situation in the demon world changed, so it was reasonable for people to be caught off guard. Therefore, Wang Lu couldn't do it. But in any case, since Wang Lu couldn't isolate the damage in the first place, then he must participate in the next step of the emergency measures. Because in theory, he was the first person to come into contact with the source of danger. Zhou Mumu's auxiliary method was very strong. When the Kunlun longevity technique was operated to the limit, it could even bring the dead back to life. However, her activation speed was not fast enough. If Zhou Mumu was prepared in advance, she could also solve this poison with all her strength. But now, she could only hand it over to Wang Lu. And this task must be completed by Wang Lu. Half an hour later, Wang Lu successfully removed the poison from the body of the last person. How do you feel? Is there any internal organ that has been irreparably damaged, such as the uterus or ovaries, or the King Pill Jade Mansion that has been fundamentally destroyed? Or is there an ugly scar on your skin that can't be removed, causing you to be disfigured for life? As Wang Lu faintly asked, he retracted his hand a bit. 4 of his 5 fingers had already moved away from the back of the person in front of him. Fortunately, I'm all right. Qianghua nodded her head and got up to leave. TSK, I think there's still a problem with the treatment just now. Some of the remaining poison is stubborn and entrenched in the body. Wait for me to circulate my magical power to remove the remaining poison for you. With that, Wang Lu's 4 fingers circulated the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi and pressed it again. Even if Qianghua used her elbow to think, she already knew what he was planning. She faintly smiled and then her figure flashed away. Wang Lu didn't pursue her and just dispersed the sword qi on his fingertips. Wang Lu had always been very unhappy with Qianghua. This was deeply rooted in his heart when Qianghua sacrificed the blood of hundreds of millions of people to the kill immortal sword in the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown. Later, he randomly punched her in the face, venting part of the unhappiness in his heart and waiting for Qianghua to change. A stubborn and arrogant Qianghua who regarded the rise and fall of the entire continent as her own responsibility must be suppressed by the cruelest means. And if Qianghua could change a little, Wang Lu didn't mind making friends with a senior sister Qianghua, whose strength was on the same level as his own. Unfortunately, when they met again, Wang Lu felt a deeper stubbornness from Qianghua. Although Qianghua didn't say it explicitly, Wang Lu could feel the killing intent in her heart. Therefore, along the way, he constantly found fault with her, making his attitude clear. However, it was understandable for cultivators to slay demons and eliminate devils. Not to mention that this time, Qianghua didn't sacrifice hundreds of millions of people. Therefore, Wang Lu couldn't say anything. What's more, in this trip to the devil realm, Qianghua's strength was indispensable. Therefore, even if Qianghua was not pleasing to the eye, he wouldn't drag the team down. Although Qianghua's detoxification work was the last, it was also because her cultivation was the highest, and the 3 of them were the most stable. As for trying to use the primal chaos sword qi after the detoxification, if Qianghua really couldn't avoid such a small trick, it could only mean that her IQ had dropped to the point where she couldn't be a member of the team, and she deserved to be kicked out of the team. In any case, under the efforts of Wang Lu, the team of lead disciples finally returned to normal. However, the experience just now made the several lead disciples feel a chill in their hearts. It was just a chilly wind. In the silence, Xiang Liang was the first to speak. Although he had also experienced a life and death crisis, there was not the slightest fluctuation on his face. Instead, he seriously asked, "What should we do next?" In the team, Xiang Liang's task was to act as a commander-in-chief. He was a qualified commander and an excellent soldier. He was not afraid of death, had a strong explosive force, and was willing to obey orders. The only question was, whose order was it? The object of Xiang Liang's question was Qianghua. In fact, the relationship between Xiang Liang and Qianghua was not good. At least, it was far less than his friendship with Wang Lu. Moreover, compared to Qianghua, Wang Lu also had the leadership ability of a small team. On this point, whether it was in terms of battle record or theory, Wang Lu had the advantage. However, Xiang Liang still chose Qianghua. The reason was very simple, because Qianghua represented the Shangjing sect, which was the leader of the Wanxian League. For Xiang Liang, who was accustomed to the social hierarchy, this reason was enough. Qianghua was also blunt. Upon hearing Xiang Liang's question, she stretched out her hand and pointed in a direction. There should be something we're looking for. In fact, no one had ever made it clear why the 5 of them came to the demon world together, but they all had a tacit understanding. After Qianghua pointed in the direction, Wang Lu did not object, because the red jade pendant on his chest was faintly heating up. However, just as he was about to voice his approval and completely determine the direction of the team, "Hey, there's nothing over there." A light female voice, speaking the language unique to the demon race, rang out from behind the 5 of them like a ghost. Chapter 457. The sudden voice really gave the five of them a great shock. Since the chilly wind blew by just now, which almost turned the five of them into minced meat, the five lead disciples have further increased their vigilance, and their primordial spirit constantly scanned the surroundings. In this case, even a Yuanying stage expert would find it difficult to hide their trace, but as a result, who exactly was the voice behind them? Demon Master? Demon King? Or was it a higher-level demon? If not, how could it be so easy to hide from the perception of the five of them? These were not the five King Pill disciples randomly found in 9 regions, but the most talented young cultivators in 9 regions. Moreover, they had specially prepared for this trip for 3 months. Unless one used absolute power to crush them, their techniques were almost unparalleled in the same realm. However, if it was really a Demon King level powerhouse, no matter how skilled the 5 of them were, they would still die. Then was this the end of their trip to the demon world? Could it be that the previous enlightenment in the group of immortal tombs and the opportunity in Kunlun Library were just a huge trap set by the demon race for the 9 regions? It was all for the sake of getting rid of these 5 talented and promising chief disciples? The so-called lead disciples, even if they had many flaws in their temperament, their brains were always very fast. A series of associations only needed a flash of time. And Wang Lu's action was even faster than the other lead disciples' thinking. After that light female voice sounded, Wang Lu directly thrust out a primal chaos sword chi toward the source of the voice. Although this sword chi was hurried, the King Pill level magical power combined with the immortal level swordsmanship caused a 100 meters long crack to open on the ground. At the same time that light voice spoke again. So it's the enemy. Then die. As soon as the voice fell, before the mysterious expert could make her move, a round earthy yellow sword defense bloomed. At the same time, the round sword defense seemed to have suffered a great pressure. At one point, the outer shell rapidly caved in. Found you. Wang Lu sneered, and the non-phased nameless sword came out. He used the primal chaos sword chi to attack first, not to hurt the enemy. He didn't even lock the enemy's position, so he couldn't use his power. Moreover, the Chaos Sword Chi could only be used after he had mastered the King Pill. Overall, he was not used to attacking first. Wang Lu's rhythm had always been defensive and counterattacking. As long as the other party made the first move, victory was in his grasp. He didn't believe that this light woman's voice belonged to a Demon King level powerhouse. Just like that gust of chilly wind just now, it was powerful in that it was difficult to detect and defend against, but it didn't mean that they were really that strong. If the poison was really so strong that it couldn't be solved, how could he, a cultivator of the King Pill sect who wasn't good at detoxification and healing, remove the poison from the 4 chief disciples? In the great war of immortals and demons, what gave the immortal cultivators the most headaches was not the strength of the demon race, but the means of the demon race that were impossible to guard against. But on the other hand, if they could be prepared, the demon race, which had nearly caused the collapse of the 9 regions, would not be so difficult to defeat. A non-phase sword defense pointed out the direction for everyone, and the nameless sword sounded the horn of counterattack. Wang Lu didn't expect this sword attack to be successful, but at this time he was not fighting alone. Almost at the same time as Wang Lu launched his non-phase sword defense, Xiang Liang chose to launch a surprise attack. Not in the direction of the nameless sword, but in a remote wilderness. The speed of Taoist Master King Pill's surprise attack was very fast. In the blink of an eye, Xiang Liang flew several miles away and triggered a big explosion. In the explosion, the distortion of space could be vaguely seen, and at the same time, there was a muffled groan of a light and agile female demon. Xiang Liang's guess was right. The real position of the other party was neither the direction of the sound nor the direction of the attack of the non-phase sword defense. From the very beginning, that elusive demon had hidden itself very well, and the attack on Wang Lu might have been remotely controlled. However, when she made her move, she still left a flaw, and Xiang Liang was very good at grasping these flaws. However, at the same time, the other 4 lead disciples in the sword defense did not follow Xiang Liang. Wang Lu coldly snorted, but the direction of the nameless sword did not change at all. Zhan Zai and Qiong Hua also poured their firepower in the direction pointed by Wang Lu. Because there was not only one enemy, and in the previous great war of immortals and demons, the demon's favorite tactic was to create a diversion. Thanks to the 3 months of special training, everyone could guess this. Therefore, the reaction of the 5 people present was fast and accurate enough, and their tacit understanding was also above the standard. Xiang Liang was responsible for the surprise attack, while the other 4 were responsible for completely suppressing the enemy's main force. The surprise attack of the 5 chief disciples split into 2 groups could be said to be spectacular, but after the first round of surprise attacks, aside from 2 muffled grunts, there were no other results. After a while, as the mountain collapsed and the earth cracked, dust fell to the ground, Xiang Liang returned the way he came, his face pale. His solemn expression showed that the results of the battle were not good. The lurking demon was still lurking, but the whistling wind was getting stronger and stronger. At this time, no one dared to take this ubiquitous cold wind lightly. Obviously, this was the unique skill of the demon race. Wang Lu's improved version of non-phase sword defense could isolate the cold wind, but they did not have the confidence to retreat under the cold wind. Therefore, Wang Lu's 30 feet square sword defense was their activity space, while the vast land outside the sword defense was the demon race's battlefield. If this drags on, we will definitely die, Zhou Mumu said in a sinking voice. Yes, we can't afford to drag on, Wang Lu simply responded. After a round of attack and defense, the several of them could basically judge that the opponent's strength was not unattainable. In a protracted fight, they would eventually reveal their flaws. However, the result of a protracted fight was that these human invaders would attract more and more attention, until the real Demon King arrived and the elite team would be wiped out. Therefore, I suggest that we cut the tangled hemp with a knife. Senior Sister Chionghua, you sacrifice yourself by exploding the king pill on the hill over there. We will take the opportunity to escape and hide, and when the situation calms down, we will continue to investigate the truth. During this period, we will remember your sacrifice so you can rest assured. As Wang Lu said that, he unceremoniously pushed Chionghua away. Chionghua had nothing to say about this kind of pig teammate. However, she also realized that the situation was indeed difficult to continue, and Wang Lu had done his best. As the first disciple of Shangjing Sect's Wanxian League, she must play the role of a leader. Thereupon, on the sword altar in her jade mansion, the glittering and translucent immortal Du sword slowly sank, and a river of blood flowed out from the painting on the wall to wash the immortal sword. A moment later, the kill immortal sword condensed and took shape in the raging waves of the sea of blood. The immortal sword that bore the grief of hundreds of millions of creatures reappeared in the world. What the hell, this is even more ruthless than exploding the king pill. Are you planning to explode your teammates? Once the kill immortal sword appeared, the entire immortal dreamland could not withstand the power of the immortal sword. Now, if Chionghua were to use her sword again, Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense would basically be like a piece of paper. The final result would be nothing more than Chionghua, as the flagship, leading her 4 teammates to win a miserable victory. Rest assured it won't hurt you. Chionhua's voice has just fallen and she was about to make her move, when suddenly the cold wind stopped and the surrounding became deathly silent. The environment didn't seem to have changed, but the threat that the several lead disciples sensed had disappeared without a trace. She ran away. The kill immortal sword's power was too strong. Even before it revealed its edge, it could already cause the surrounding spiritual energy to become chaotic. The more sensitive demons would naturally be able to perceive the change, but if they were cautious by nature, they would temporarily retreat. Alright, let's go. With that, Chionhua's kill immortal sword sank back into the sword altar. However, the blood light of the immortal sword was hidden on her fingertips, which faintly deterred the surrounding area. The 4 lead disciples were silent. Chionhua's move was quite unexpected. The kill immortal sword was like a bow but not released, which meant that her control over the immortal sword had gradually entered the realm of refinement. However, in the 5 blood spirit crown battle, Chionghua was far from having this kind of ability. At that time she had to go all out. The effect of the blood sacrifice of hundreds of millions of creatures was undoubtedly evident. Using the power of the immortal sword to deter the hidden enemy was certainly a wonderful move, but the several of them couldn't relax at all. The enemy was still there, but the immortal sword was exposed. In the vast land of the demon world, a lot of seeds of destruction had been buried. It seemed that this trip to the demon world would not last for too long. After finding out the truth, they would return to 9 regions as fast as possible. This time no one needed to say anything. Taking advantage of the rare silence, the 5 of them moved at full speed toward the place pointed by Qianghua. And then, what the hell, you guys are running so fast? Wang Lu, who was the first to be left behind, was surprised. As the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, whose attack and defense attributes were the highest among the 5, Wang Lu didn't have an all-round suppression on the others. Because his speed was really a shortcoming. It couldn't be reflected when he was in a hurry, but once he needed to burst out at full speed, the problem would undoubtedly become obvious. Hold on tight. Upon hearing this, Zhou Mumu turned her head and grabbed Wang Lu's sleeve. At this time, the role of interpersonal relationship was very important. If it was Zhang Zai who fell behind, perhaps only Zhou Mumu's sneer would turn around to look for him. However, Qianghua and the others didn't have the chance to leave Wang Lu too far behind. Therefore, not long after they continued to move forward, the enemy finally revealed their true colors. I told you there's nothing in front. The heavily armored demon girl angrily bared her fangs. Upon seeing her, Wang Lu was surprised. Lan? Although her temperament was very different from that of the young master of Grey Mountain, the iconic heavy armor, the dexterous long tail, and the red face and fangs, who else could this be but Lan? To be precise, this was Lan's descendant. However, at the time of the 5 Blood Spirits Crown battle, Lan was already alone. As the young master of Grey Mountain, she couldn't even manage her own business, let alone take care of her personal affairs. Later, under the leadership of Wang Lu, there was hope for the revival of Grey Mountain, but it was broken by Qianghua's sword, and all the people who could form a family with Lan were sacrificed by Qianghua. Then, could it be that these 2 children were? Yes, the one who spent the longest time with Lan was thinking of this. The other chief disciples also turned their heads to look at Wang Lu. Zhou Mumu directly let go of Wang Lu's sleeve, and with an expression as if she had touched something dirty, she said, Wang Lu, I didn't expect you to be such a person. F***ck, what nonsense are you talking about? Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised, but soon he also blew the horn to counterattack. Wang Lu sneered, Surname Zhou, it's too late to draw a line with me now. You held my hand, so you're already pregnant with my child. Just wait to go back and give birth. Chapter 458. Since his debut, Wang Lu was not always undefeated. At least, when he practiced his swordsmanship on the mountain, he had lost many times to Lu Li. And before he mastered the King Pill and formed a generation gap with Lu Li, he actually didn't have much of an advantage against the girl's brilliant sword heart. His odds of winning were no more than 40 to 60%. As for the more powerful big sister Zhu Shiyao, needless to say, although the 2 of them didn't fight much, Wang Lu believed that his odds of winning were only 50% at most, which was not much of an advantage. Of course, it was still much better than that year when he had no chance of winning in a head-on fight. However, in terms of moral integrity, in addition to his master, Wang Lu was not inferior to anyone. Since Zhou Mumu gave him this move, then don't blame him for being impolite and becoming a father. Zhou Mumu could also be called a person with strong mind and tenacity. Especially since she met Wang Lu, she was shocked by his repeatedly breaking the lower limit performance, which made her nerves a lot sturdier. However, now that she was directly confronted by Wang Lu, she suddenly felt that her years of cultivation were vulnerable. Under the shame and anger, she almost went crazy. If the scene didn't change. Go back. The 2 heavily armored girls solemnly said. There's nothing in front of us. Nothing in front of us? This kind of self-confession was simply a signal for the several lead disciples to charge forward. Wang Lu and the others looked at each other, and then, as if by prior agreement, they all made their move. Primal Chaos Heaven-Splitting Sword Qi. Immortal Dew Sword Light, Thunder Body. The attacks of the 5 lead disciples immediately submerged the figures of the 2 heavily armored girls. Among them, Wang Lu's move was the most ruthless, regardless of the blood relationship between them. Blood relationship, my ass. Even if they were the descendants of Lan, so what? The 5 Blood Spirit Crown struggle was, in the final analysis, just a show. Even if Wang Lu didn't reject the demon race, he also knew the difference between immortal and demon. Moreover, from the moment he saw the 2 heavily armored girls, Wang Lu had a vague ominous premonition. The other party's strength was far from as weak as it looked. If they didn't use their full strength, the ones who would die would be them, the chief disciples. The intense attacks launched by the 5 chief disciples had stirred up a storm of energy, which had caused the ground within a radius of 1 mile to sink down by over 10 feet. This was the result of the high concentration of the magic power of the chief disciples, which prevented too much of the power from leaking out. In the center of the storm, the 2 heavily armored girls were in a sorry state. The girl in front was slightly taller, and the armor on her body was also heavier. At this moment, she was holding a tower shield, protecting the other girl behind her, but the all-encompassing energy storm still left their armor full of scars. The tower shield was also damaged by the chaotic sword chi, and could no longer be used. Although it looked like it was difficult to continue, Wang Lu and the others continued to attack wave after wave. After experiencing the chilly wind whistling just now, everyone knew that the means of these devils were strange and unpredictable. Before completely establishing the victory, they must not lower their guard. Very good. In the gap between the storm, the demon girl's voice was no longer light and lively. Knowing our identities but still not repenting. The young devils these days are really becoming more and more useless. Since you insist on dying, we will help you. As she spoke, the shield-wielding girl suddenly dropped the shield in her hand. The armor on her arms and legs also naturally fell off, revealing crimson, smooth and eye-catching skin. However, before they could carefully admire that jade-like skin, as the armor fell off, an astonishing demon strength was released, immediately forming a strong gust of wind that slightly deflected the attacks of the 5 chief disciples. Then, the demon girl roared and clasped her hands together. A red barrier of light rose up, completely isolating the attacks of the 5 chief disciples. Her defensive ability was several times better than the previous heavy shield. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. It turned out that the demon girl's heavy armor was not used to protect herself, but to suppress her strength. The less armor she wore, the more powerful her combat strength was. This was really a delightful setting. Wang Lu coldly snorted. Everyone, put in more effort. Let her take off a few more pieces. Not long after, more offensive spells rained down like a storm. The demon girl's red barrier of light was on the verge of collapse. Left with no choice, the armor on her waist and shoulders also fell off, revealing a large area of her smooth skin. The red barrier of light finally stabilized. Come on. This girl is about to reveal some. But as he spoke, Wang Lu couldn't help but frown. Back then he had been with Lan for a long time, but he never knew that the demons of Grey Mountain had this kind of setting where their clothes would explode. He also didn't know that the starving girl had always been hiding her strength in front of him. He had long guessed that Lan might not be as simple as she looked, but he didn't expect her to hide it so deeply. However, now was not the time to think about the 5 blood spirits crown because danger was right in front of them. As the shackles of the demon girl's armor gradually disappeared, her strength also increased rapidly. As the heavy armor gradually turned into the erotic type, her strength increased again, impressively surpassing the level of the 5 chief disciples. Even if the 5 joined forces, it would still be difficult to suppress them. Even now, there were still a few key pieces of armor on the demon girl's body that had not been taken off. While covering her body, it also made people realize that her potential was still bottomless. And just as Wang Lu was wondering whether she would completely release all her strength at once, he suddenly felt his vision blur, and in the light barrier, the figures of the 2 demon girls disappeared. At the same time, Zhou Mumu's muffled groan sounded behind him, and then the girl was hit by a heavy object, flying back hundreds of feet, directly plunging into the ground with a loud crash. Without looking back, Wang Lu knew that this was the demon girl's counterattack, because although they had disappeared, their armors were still on the ground. The whole set was there. If there was no accident, the 2 girls were running naked at this time. The demon race was indeed the demon race, they were really open. However, the other party also had enough confidence to be so bold. Because after taking off the last 2 pieces of armor, their speed was already so fast that it was difficult for people to react, let alone catch them. In a hurry, Qianghua and Zhanzai's spells repeatedly missed, and the cautious Yangliang simply did not find an opportunity to attack. Even if Wang Lu wanted to see He knew that with his current level of eyesight, he simply could not see anything. What was the highest level of naked running? This was it. Damn, I really met the Demon King. Wang Lu narrowed his eyes, made a final evaluation of the demon girl in his heart, and then resolutely changed his move. The 5 of them joined forces, but they could not even catch the shadow of the demon girl, which could only mean that there was a generation gap between their strength. In this case, even if they fought desperately, they would only be asking for humiliation. It was time to use his trump card. Wang Lu reached into his mustard seed bag, hooked his finger, and hooked out his trump card. It was an orange and red spotted mushroom, which was the little gift from South Pole Immortal Wang, who had followed Immortal Wang for hundreds of years. After swallowing this bitter mushroom, Wang Lu felt that the king pill in his jade mansion seemed to burst open, and the violent energy swept out, causing the 206 sword bones to tremble. It was as if the sword bones that supported the sky were torn apart by the gale, and then extended along with the wind, becoming longer and thicker. No man would refuse the temptation of being thick and long, but if the price was heart-tearing and lung-splitting pain, perhaps many people would begin to hesitate. The taste of a mushroom that became bigger was not good. However, Wang Lu cultivated the non-phase method, so he had long been accustomed to the pain. Without changing his expression, he increased his body size by 10,000 times. A 300 meters tall giant appeared in the wilderness of the demon world. This? The companions beside him were the first to exclaim. As the lead disciples of the 5 uniques, each of them had a trump card at the critical moment. For example, Qionghua's Kill Immortal Sword was one of them. However, this trump card of Wang Lu was undoubtedly beyond the expectation of many people. The 2 demon girls were also stunned. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, Wang Lu took a step forward and then stomped his foot down. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. The ground within a radius of several miles was crushed by Wang Lu's foot, and countless bottomless cracks bloomed. At the same time, the muffled groan of the 2 demon girls was like the sound of nature. The moment Zhou Mumu was knocked down by the surprise attack, Wang Lu had roughly calculated their radius of activity. Under the premise that he couldn't react in time, it was about a radius of 1 mile. Even if Wang Lu expanded his foot by 10,000 times with the help of the mushroom, his foot could not cover a radius of 1 mile. However, when he turned into a giant, he suddenly felt a flash of light in his mind. His non-phase sword defense and primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi accidentally had a trace of connection, and then they fused and wrapped around the sole of his foot. With this foot, his magical power erupted, and all the creatures within 1 mile were exterminated. The 2 demon girls simply could not avoid it. Indeed worthy to be the companion of the South Pole Immortal Wang for hundreds of years. This power was really. However, just when Wang Lu and the others were secretly shocked by the power of this blow, Wang Lu suddenly heard a tired but proud voice. So that's how it is. This is the reason why you're so fearless. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled and turned his eyes to the direction of the voice. 2 naked demon girls were supporting each other as they stood on a small hill in the distance. Both of them looked a bit embarrassed. Among them, the taller one was especially seriously injured, and it was almost difficult for her to stand. The demon girl, who was able to deal with the attacks of the 5 lead disciples with ease, was seriously injured by Wang Lu's foot. The effect of the mushroom left by the South Pole Immortal Wang could be clearly seen. However, at this time, those magical mushrooms were no longer in Wang Lu's hands. The younger and more petite demon girl was holding Wang Lu's mustard seed bag in her hand. Then, one by one, she took out the magical mushrooms from the bag with her slender fingers. As for the iron rule that the mustard seed bag could not be opened by the owner, it was as if it didn't exist in her hands. Wang Lu stared straight at her, his eyes awe-inspiring. It was not too unbelievable. If he could have a heaven-defying card, then why couldn't the demon girl, whose strength was above him, also have a trump card? It was probably through this trump card that she was able to survive the landslide and steal his mustard seed bag. Unfortunately, it was a bit too late to realize all this. With a trace of regret, Wang Lu's figure changed from a giant to an ordinary person. And what he heard was the demon girl's triumphant voice. I didn't expect there to be such a magical thing in this world. Just an inconspicuous mushroom can make people reborn. As she spoke, the demon girl took out 2 mushrooms, one for her sister, and directly swallowed them, even ignoring the fact that the same mushroom might have different reactions to different people, showing her extreme confidence in her digestive ability. And then, the 2 sisters swayed, their faces suddenly turned green, and then they fell to the ground. Wang Lu was stunned for a long time, and then under the puzzled eyes of Qiong Hua and the others, shook his head indifferently and sighed. Alas, can mushrooms be eaten indiscriminately? These 2 fiend race women are seriously too lacking in common sense. With that, he stepped forward, walked to the top of the hill, and carefully looked at the 2 naked demon girls. Then Wang Lu turned his head and asked the others, "Should we do something to them?" Chapter 459. The demon race was indeed the demon race. In the 2 great wars of immortals and demons, the exuberant vitality of the demon race left a very deep impression on human cultivators. Cutting off the head and destroying the heart could not cause a fatal injury. Even the injury that touched the depths of the soul could not really defeat them. Moreover, compared to human, most of the demon race were immune to all kinds of poisons. Those deadly poisons in 9 regions might just be the dessert of the demon race. Therefore, even if they randomly ate the mushrooms, the 2 demon girls did not die on the spot, but just passed out. And Wang Lu and the others did not intend to take their lives, because this was their first battle trophy in the demon world. And if they wanted to uncover the truth hidden in the demon world, they had to find someone to ask. Should we do something to them? Wang Lu pointed to the demon race sisters who had fainted on the top of the mountain and asked with a serious look, "What are you going to do to them?" Zhou Mumu vigilantly examined Wang Lu, watching the latter's finger gesticulating back and forth on the enchanting curves of the demon race girls. Don't mess around, they are, after all, demon race. According to the literature, sexual assault on the enemy of the opposite sex can effectively weaken the enemy's fighting spirit. However, there are also many counterexamples, so it can't be used as a common practice. As for the effect on the demon race, there are few pioneers and the information is not sufficient. Wang Lu, if you don't mind, I hope to watch and record the whole process and collect data, which will play an important role in enriching the relevant research. Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then said, "In addition to going to bed, can you 2 think about serious things?" Zhou Mumu was stunned. She never thought that one day, it would be Wang Lu's turn to question whether the things in other people's minds were serious or not. When the 2 demon race girls woke up, they found that they had been very cruelly treated. All of their powers had been sealed by someone. The method of setting up the seal was very exquisite, so that they could not resist at all. Even if they had great ability, they could not display it. They were forced to wear clothes. Moreover, there was more than one set. In addition to their custom-made armor, there were 7 to 8 sets of undergarments on the inside of the armor, and 4 to 5 sets of robes on the outside. Even their faces were wrapped tightly with silk, and they even wore blindfolds, making it airtight. He didn't know who came up with this idea. The idea was simple and plain, but it was indeed useful, because they really couldn't exert any strength now. There were 2 main points to releasing an explosive force after removing the armor. First, one had to use the special armor to forcefully suppress one's strength for a long period of time before releasing the explosive force. Second, after removing the armor, one's body had to be in full contact with the outside world without any obstructions. Now they had already used up all the energy they had accumulated, and the accumulation was no longer there. At the same time, their skin was blocked off from the outside world, so there was nothing they could do to reverse the situation. However, compared to the layers of clothes, the most lethal part was the mushrooms that they had swallowed. That was a highly toxic poison that even the devil race was terrified of. If it weren't for the fact that their aptitudes were among the best in the devil race, their bodies and souls would have been destroyed when they swallowed the mushrooms just now. Although they were lucky enough to not die, their internal organs were all on fire. In addition, their external powers were sealed, so they could not muster up any strength. Those 2 mushrooms had turned everything around. Before they lost consciousness, they were stunned to find that the effect of the mushrooms they had swallowed was not what they had expected. They knew that they had lost. They had lost to an incomparably insidious and despicable trick. That cunning opponent had deliberately used the mushrooms to attract their attention. When they had activated their secret method and staked everything on one throw to snatch the mushrooms, they had already fallen into the trap. However, a loss was a loss. According to the rules of the devil race, they would either die or face a fate worse than death. But as a devil race, they had long been aware of this. We have something to ask you. Just as the two demon race girls were ready to die, Wang Lu opened his mouth to ask, "What have you been hiding all this time?" In fact, Wang Lu was really curious. If these two devil race girls had directly attacked without saying anything, Wang Lu wouldn't have been surprised. Whether it was his identity as a human cultivator being exposed, or the natural bloodthirstiness of the devil race, it was normal for a battle to break out on the land of the devil race. However, they said that there was nothing ahead, which was not normal. Although he could also leave the two of them and go straight ahead, after suffering a loss because of them, Wang Lu felt that it was better to be cautious. Not all the devil race girls would eat his big mushrooms without hesitation. However, upon hearing Wang Lu's words, the two girls who were wrapped like dumplings were startled. "Who exactly are you?" Upon hearing this, Wang Lu frowned. What kind of question is this? If I ask what is ahead, I will be suspected. Could it be that the thing ahead is a secret that everyone in the devil race knows? And when they said that there was nothing ahead, did they mean something else? I don't know anything about it, so I exposed my identity as soon as I opened my mouth? That being the case, I might as well go straight to the point. We are cultivators from 9 regions. Human. As soon as his voice fell, one of the dumplings on the ground suddenly jumped up, and her already exhausted power suddenly surged. However, after Wang Lu put dozens of layers of clothes on her, the suppression effect was too strong. As soon as the girl got up, she fell to the ground. However, after falling to the ground, she still cursed. "How dare you come here?" Another girl also angrily said, "So the passage between the two worlds is open again? Very well. We will definitely rekindle the demonic fire in 9 regions, and return the pain of the past 10,000 years 100-fold. Upon hearing this, the eyes of the 5 lead disciples lit up. Why did they come to the devil world? In addition to their own personal reasons, exploring the truth of the great war of immortals and demons was also one of the main tasks. These two obviously knew a lot of things, so if they didn't ask them, who else should they ask? "What do you mean by the pain of the past 10,000 years? Wang Lu asked. According to the records of 9 regions, the first to ignite the fire of war is your demon race, so it's not your turn to take revenge. At hashtag, the 2 demon girls roared at the same time, bursting out unknown syllables. Unfortunately, Wang Lu and the others couldn't understand these words. The camouflage spell that they cast when they came to the devil world was limited. At least the translation effect was not perfect. However, they could guess that the 2 girls must have said the vulgar language unique to the demon race. The 2 girls probably felt that their cursing was not enough, so they simply jumped up. Moreover, because of their anger, they could even support themselves to stand upright. The taller one still tried to jump in front of Wang Lu to hit him. Unfortunately, because his eyes were blindfolded, Wang Lu only took 2 steps to the side, and the tall girl accidentally tripped on a stone and rolled all the way down the mountain. While Xiang Liang went down the mountain to bring back the confused girl, Wang Lu continued to question the petite girl. "Moreover, you demon race dare to talk about counterattacking 9 regions? You've been defeated by us twice, and now we, the young and promising Taoist Master King Pill, have taken the initiative to set foot on the land of the devil world. Where do you guys get the confidence to rekindle the war in 9 regions? We can let you guys defeat all of you with one hand, believe it or not." The petite girl looked like she was about to go mad with anger. Wang Lu looked back at Zhou Mumu and said with a smile, "It feels good to be able to scold her even though I don't understand what she's talking about." Zhou Mumu sighed and said, "Stop playing around, let's get down to business." Wang Lu's face turned serious. "I'm not playing around." Through her reaction, I have guessed 2 things. First, the demon race was really badly beaten in the past, and the injury has not been healed for thousands of years. Second, the demon race actually has no confidence to counterattack 9 regions. Because when I questioned their ability, they couldn't come up with anything, and only knew how to shout and wrangle. Third, because of this, the demon race has never thought about counterattacking 9 regions, and they don't even care about the situation of us human beings. This point can be judged from the fact that they have never recognized us. Wang Lu's speculation was not without reason, but it was still weak. Therefore, after some discussion, they decided to deal with the two demon girls and then go to the land in front of them to explore. However, just as Wang Lu was about to go up and finish them off, there was a sudden tremor under their feet. Looking around, there was only silence and blankness. There was nothing out of the ordinary, as if it was just an ordinary earthquake. However, Wang Lu didn't think so. He frowned and glanced at Chonghua. Among them, Chonghua had the highest cultivation base and the most comprehensive ability. If Wang Lu couldn't detect the abnormality, it didn't mean that Chonghua couldn't. However, Chonghua just frowned and said, "There seems to be some danger approaching, but I can't see it clearly." Wang Lu then turned his attention to the two demons on the ground. As local natives, they were the most likely to know the truth. However, when he turned his eyes, he saw the two lying side by side, motionless like zombies. "Hey, do you two know what this earthquake is about?" Zhou Mumu was a bit impatient and had already asked. Naturally, she couldn't get any answer. Wang Lu thought for a moment and patted Zhou Mumu on the shoulder. "Let's go. Go." They didn't speak, which just proves that the newcomer is dangerous, because they want to use the newcomer to perish together with us. For them to make this judgment, it is obviously the other party's strength. They have already accepted their own death, so it doesn't matter what happens to them, so they are particularly calm at this time. Zhou Mumu listened and felt that it did make sense. Then what? Then of course we have to run, but we can't detect the source of the danger, so it's not necessarily the right direction to run in. But at least there is one thing, that place with nothing in it may be the only safe corner. There was no time for Wang Lu to say a detailed analysis, but these words were enough to convince the other four. "Let's go." Chonghua was the first to stand up. She stretched out her hand and wrapped up the two demon girls on the ground with an immortal rope, and then took the lead to fly towards the mysterious place. With Chonghua's statement, the rest of them no longer hesitated. After crossing a mountain, the five people finally saw the place regarded as a forbidden area by the two demons, a place with nothing in it. Indeed, there was nothing but emptiness. But this emptiness was too unnatural. The ground within a radius of 10 miles was as flat as a mirror, so neat that it was almost strange. At this moment, the unknown threat finally arrived. It did not come from any specific direction, but from all directions, covering the sky and covering the earth. The unique blood-colored clouds of the demon realm were suddenly dyed black by thick ink, and then rolled down. In a few blinks of an eye, the world of the demon realm was shrouded in darkness. And this scene suddenly reminded Wang Lu of something old. This is the Black Tide? Chapter 460. The Savage Land, the Black Tide of the Western Mountain, was once an important place for Wang Lu to practice cultivation. In the Black Tide, Wang Lu initially mastered the non-phase sword qi, and became familiar with the method of burning innate vitality. It was also in the Black Tide that he met a stupid dog. Later, the dog followed him back to Spirit Sword Mountain, and was identified as the Western Continent monster Wolf Fenrir. Although his cultivation time in the Black Tide was not long, he had experienced a lot of things, leaving behind even more mysteries. What he saw and heard in the Black Tide, Wang Lu had never seen it in any information outside of Spirit Sword Mountain, as if it was a specialty that only Spirit Sword Mountain had. Many of the strange scenes in the Black Tide were also contrary to common sense and inexplicable. Moreover, after that Black Tide practice, there seemed to be some opposition in Heavenly Sword Hall, so that Wang Lu never entered the Western Mountain again. Later, even his big sister Zhu Shiyao, who had always been accustomed to fighting in the Black Tide, was forbidden to enter the Western Mountain. These things puzzled Wang Lu, but the elders firmly refused to talk about it. Thus, Wang Lu realized that the elders probably did not want him to know about these things, so, for the time being, he respected their opinion. In any case, Wang Lu always had a lot of problems to deal with, so there was no need to deliberately open this branch. And now Wang Lu finally saw the Black Tide again. But there were even more mysteries in his heart. The Black Tide of the demon world was far more terrifying than what he saw at the foot of the Western Mountain. The thick darkness brought an amazing sense of oppression. In the past, when he was still in the qi cultivating stage, he was still able to survive in the Western Mountain. But now that he was promoted to Taoist Master King Pil, his strength was hundreds and thousands of times more than in the past. He was oppressed and unable to move. Come to think of it, if he did not stay in the Western Mountain but continued to go deep into the Savage Land, he would probably encounter this kind of black tide one day. But why? Why did the black tide of the Savage Land appear in the demon world? It was hard to believe that it was a coincidence, but to say that there was a connection between the two. What kind of connection did the Lingjian school, one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, have with the demon world? Unfortunately, Wang Lu did not have time to think too much. The black tide had completely descended. In the face of such a drastic change, Qianghua and the others were at a loss. Although each of them had their own life-saving trump cards, no one could guarantee that they would survive the black tide, because such a catastrophe was truly unheard of. Dig! At this critical moment, Wang Lu assumed the role of commander. While speaking, he took the lead in opening a bottomless pit on the ground with the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. Come in. After the 5 of them entered the underground cave, Wang Lu immediately turned around and sealed the entrance with an earth element spell. Then, he took out a few bright jades from his mustard seed bag and lit them up. Fortunately, as a professional adventurer, he had the spirit of a squirrel. He would not throw away anything that he could avoid. He still kept the items he found in the West Mountain black tide. The bright jade was indeed very effective. Several pieces were ignited at the same time, and the cave was filled with light. The black mist that penetrated through the cracks in the soil shrilly shrieked and retreated. Wang Lu was relieved. When he used the bright jades to fight against the black tide was at the primary level that even a qi cultivating stage cultivator could barely survive. But now, the pressure of the black tide had been strengthened thousands of times. Unexpectedly, the bright jades were really useful. What is this? Zhou Mumu curiously tried to touch it with her hand. Wang Lu unceremoniously pushed her hand away and said, "How old are you? How could he be so careless and hit everything? Aren't you afraid of touching shit?" Tsh. Zhou Mumu disdainfully withdrew her hand. However, Zhang Zai's eyes suddenly lit up. "Hey, this is the seed of the eternal tree." Huh. Wang Lu was also taken aback. The seed of the eternal tree. Zhang Zai repeatedly nodded, and then took out a set of equipment from his mustard seed bag. He then unceremoniously took out a relatively intact piece of bright jade from the pile, extinguished the flame, and put it into a jade bottle. At the bottom of the jade bottle, there were many thin silk lines connected to a set of measuring instruments. A moment later, the water screen projection of the instrument reflected many complex numbers and marks. Zhang Zai nodded while looking at it and finally confirmed, "That's right, this is the seed of the eternal tree. If you don't believe me, look." With that, he summoned the eternal tree from his jade mansion. However, this time there was only one branch, and at the end of the branch, there was a little bit of glittering and translucent luster, which was 80 to 90% similar to the bright jade. Thus, Wang Lu fell into a deeper confusion. Why did the seed of the eternal tree appear in the 9 regions, the Savage Land? Was there any logical relationship between them? At this time, the demon race girl, who was wrapped like a rice dumpling by Qianghua, suddenly jumped up and sternly asked, "Where did you get it?" Wang Lu kicked her to lie flat on the ground. "Pay attention to your identity, Miss ******. This is not the place for you to yell. Where did you get the seed of the eternal tree? What do you care? You're already dead, so if you're dead, then please act like a dead person and lie down." After a moment of silence, the arrogance of the 2 demon race girls suddenly extinguished, and their attitude softened infinitely. Please tell us, where did you find the seed of the eternal tree?" Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed at Zhang Zai. "In his stomach." "What, you don't believe me? Do you think it's impossible for a seed to be in a person's stomach? Humph, have you ever eaten fish roe?" As soon as his voice fell, Zhang Zai didn't have any reaction, but Zhou Mumu very firmly took a step back, a bit further away from the burning bright jade. Obviously, she was disgusted by Wang Lu's fish roe theory. After a moment of silence, the taller demon race girl suddenly made a sound. Then, her nose moved and she turned her head in the direction of Zhang Zai. I really seem to smell the smell of a tree. While speaking, the taller girl couldn't help but squirm toward Zhang Zai. Her head, which was tightly wrapped in silk, blindfold and other things, also tried to move forward. Although it was covered, Wang Lu could still feel the girl's scorching eyes. Then he sighed. Hey, the direction of your eyes is aimed at the big tree between senior brother Zai's legs. But your reaction makes me curious about one thing. What happened to the eternal tree in your demon world? Zhang Zai said, I also want to ask. Since entering the demon world, I can't feel the call from the eternal tree. But when I was in 9 regions, I could clearly see the shadow of the eternal tree. For a time, everyone seemed to have their own questions, and none of them seemed to have an answer. In the silence, Chonghua suddenly said, the seed of the eternal tree can resist the strange black mist, so there is likely to be a connection between the two. But the eternal tree that should exist has disappeared, so I think it could be. Wang Lu said, the black tide is transformed by the eternal tree? It's indeed a way to think. The eternal tree of the demon world encountered an accident, and was transformed into the black tide that destroyed all living things. And because of this, the demon world has lost the capital to counterattack the 9 regions. In this way, several clues can be connected together. As he spoke, Wang Lu nodded his head again, and then inwardly sighed. She was indeed worthy to be his senior sister Chonghua. Her IQ level was not on the same level as that of the other lead disciples. Unfortunately, the path was wrong. The more knowledge she had, the more reactionary she would be. Chonghua's intelligence and wisdom would only lead her further and further down the wrong path. The current Chonghua was still the same Chonghua who could sacrifice hundreds of millions of creatures without batting an eyelid. She was still the same Chonghua who regarded the difference between immortal and demon as a matter of life and death. She was still the same Chonghua who believed that she was the leader of 9 regions, and must shoulder the heavy responsibility that ordinary people could not bear. Along the way, Wang Lu repeatedly provoked her, but she remained indifferent. It was precisely because she had the mind of a leader. If such a Chonghua could become a true teammate, it would be a great blessing. Unfortunately, the path was not right. Wang Lu once again sighed regretfully in his heart, and then pondered a bit about what reason he should use to find fault with Chonghua to clearly show his position. This black mist is indeed related to the eternal tree. Zhang Zai suddenly made a clear judgment. He pointed to his pile of complex instruments and equipment and said, there is a great correlation between the two. Then he closed his mouth and said nothing. Zhou Mumu curiously asked, that's it? What about the process? How did it come to be related? Zhang Zai sneered and said, with your academic level, can you even understand what I said? It's enough to remember the result. At least you still have this kind of memory, right? Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows. She was about to fight to the death with Zhang Zai here. Fortunately, Chonghua spoke again. Just now, the 2 demons said that there is nothing here. Did they mean the eternal tree? Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, the possibility is not small. This is probably the site of the eternal tree. Well, I'm afraid it's more than that. In addition to the eternal tree, there should be other things. With that, Wang Lu reached out and clenched that piece of red jade that was already burning hot. The red jade in his hand was undoubtedly an important clue, but Wang Lu didn't want to expose it so quickly. Now that the eternal tree's line has not been completely sorted out, there was no need to open a new branch. Moreover, the primary problem now was the black tide. It was true that the bright jade could resist the black tide, but Wang Lu also discovered that, because the intensity of the black tide here was far stronger than the black tide in the western mountain, the bright jade was burning very fast and obviously could not last for too long, and it was also unknown how long this black tide would last. However, there was no need to worry about this, because Wang Lu had already thought of a solution. At least 2 people here knew how to survive in the black tide. Using the bright jade to resist the black tide was not the only way, because the 2 of them could still be alive and kicking today. It was not because they used the bright jade as charcoal every day, right? Of course, no one expected them to honestly cooperate, but now everyone could take what they needed. Let's make a deal. We will tell you what we know about the eternal tree, and you will tell me how to survive in the black tide. Bah! Wang Lu was not surprised by the stubbornness of the demon girls. Persuading them with kind words was certainly not going to work, so the next step was, "It doesn't matter if you don't say it," Wang Lu said and pointed his finger at Zhan Zai. "He has a new eternal tree on him. If you are willing to watch him die together with the eternal tree, then stay silent." In just one sentence, the two demon girls' hearts were suddenly pierced. "Let us go, we will take you to a safe place." Chapter 461. Wang Lu was now somewhat regretful, because he felt that he had made a bad deal. Just now, in order to ensure their safety under the black tide, he promised to let the two of them live, and the two of them told him the safe place. In Wang Lu's view, this was a fair deal. However, when he lifted the seal on the two girls, the two of them just pointed downwards. "It's down there." Wang Lu was puzzled. "What do you mean by down there?" "Dig down another 10 feet and you'll be there." Wang Lu was surprised to hear this. Without even using his sword qi, an earth element technique bloomed from his fingertips, melting the soil under his feet. After digging for less than 10 feet, the ground below suddenly became clear, and a bottomless pit appeared in front of him. "What is this?" Zhou Mumu said in disbelief, her eyes glowing, trying to see the situation in the hole. With her king pill level cultivation base, her perception of the environment was already very keen, but before Wang Lu opened the passage, she did not notice the huge hole 10 feet below her feet. This hole was really strange. Moreover, no matter how she changed her cultivation technique, the cave was still pitch black. "What's inside?" As soon as her voice fell, she heard a sizzling sound. The bright jade on the ground had been burned out, and from the cracks in the soil, countless black fog spread in. "Let's go in first." Wang Lu grabbed Zhou Mumu's sleeve and jumped into the hole with the girl. Then with a flash of light it suddenly became clear. Looking from above it was obviously pitch black. But when they entered they saw a bright light in front of them. The white light covered every inch of space, making them feel as if they were in a sacred palace. This scene was not unfamiliar to some people. "It looks like we are inside the eternal tree." During the period of the 5 spirits power struggle, Zhan Zai and Zhou Mumu, as the wood spirit and water spirit respectively, had entered the core of the eternal tree, which was quite similar to this place. This is indeed the inside of the eternal tree. The former eternal tree. The tall demon girl said coldly. "Former?" Wang Lu asked, "Is the eternal tree really finished? If the eternal tree was still here, how could it be your turn to be arrogant here?" The petite girl angrily said, "Wasn't it you human cultivators who cut off our eternal tree? Why are you asking such a question now? Humans cut down the eternal tree?" Wang Lu was surprised. When did this happen? How come I've never heard of it? Can you tell me in detail? You're still playing dumb. As the petite girl spoke, she once again gathered power within her body. For the devil race, anger was also a source of power. Wait a minute. The tall girl pulled her back. These humans are a little different. What's different? They were clearly the same blasphemer. They even dared to plant the seed of eternity in that filthy human. The petite girl roared as she broke free from the other girl's grasp. Then the armor on her limbs fell off, and it looked like she was about to fight again. The tall girl frowned. She clearly didn't want to fight, but since her companion was so determined, she could only fight to the end. At the end of the day, the other party was just a few human cultivators. Killing them was not a big deal. Thinking of this, her armor also began to fall off, and her strength steadily rose. Seeing that the demon race girl was so obviously hostile, the several lead disciples naturally assumed a fighting posture. However, after experiencing the power of these two demons, no one had the confidence to win against her. No one could have imagined that the demon race girl, who had just been beaten to a near-death state, would actually, just because of a few words from Wang Lu, be angry and resurrected. If the demon race had this ability, 9 regions would have long been overturned by the demon race. At this critical moment, Zhou Mumu suddenly called out her blood-marked divine spear, and then pointed it at Zhan Zai. "Hey! Don't you want the eternal tree?" "Eternal tree? What a joke!" The petite girl sneered and then screamed to the sky. At the same time, Zhan Zai fell to the ground, bleeding from his 7 orifices. You dare to mention the eternal tree in this space? Stupid blasphemer. Can't we kill you and take out the eternal tree sapling ourselves? What the F***ck Zhanzai, you're just a fragile kid. Yet you're actually killed in seconds. Wang Lu clenched his teeth, deeply feeling that the world was unpredictable. Zhanzai was silently killed in seconds, which was obviously caused by the resonance of the eternal tree. Compared to his branch, the two girls controlled the eternal tree itself. The 5 lead disciples were already at a disadvantage against the 2 demon race girls. Now that they lost one more person, they really had no chance of winning. As for the mushrooms of the South Pole immortal Wang, needless to say, Wang Lu didn't dare to eat them. Now that things have come to this, junior brother Wang Lu, presumably you have nothing to say, right? At the critical moment, Xianghua lightly opened her mouth and calmly asked Wang Lu. Wang Lu knew what she wanted to say. Wang Lu didn't have a card in his hand, but she did. Once the Kill Immortal sword came out, the 2 demon race girls would definitely die. Although they were strong, it would still be difficult for them to block the Kill Immortal sword. Although their speed was fast, when there was a black tide outside, their range of action was limited to this bright place, and they couldn't escape the locking range of the Kill Immortal sword. However, if Xianghua really made a move, there would be no room for mediation. However, Wang Lu went through all this trouble not to let the 2 of them die just like that. There's no need to waste it, I have a way. Wang Lu said, made a decision in his heart, and took out the red jade pendant. In fact, he couldn't hide it anymore. After entering this space, the red jade pendant kept heating up. Now, even his non-phase golden body couldn't bear it anymore. If he didn't take it out, he was afraid it would explode in his hand. And since the red jade pendant had made such a clear statement, it was obviously the time for it to show up. As soon as the red jade pendant appeared, the 2 demon girls suddenly opened their eyes wide, and an incredulous look appeared on their faces. This is, why do you have? While talking, the 2 of them unconsciously knelt down. Although they were in a fighting state without their armors, the power in their body was rapidly dissipating. They didn't want to fight anymore. Moreover, they clearly expressed their intention to surrender. This amazing change was beyond Wang Lu's expectation. He looked at the blazing red jade pendant, and then looked at the demon sisters who had already knelt down in front of him. After thinking for a moment, he immediately raised the red jade pendant in front of Xianghua. Senior sister Xianghua, seeing this red jade pendant, what do you think? Xianghua sighed, at least, I never thought of kneeling down and begging for mercy. TSK, this red jade is really useless. Wang Lu said, put away the red jade pendant, and then asked the 2 demons, do you recognize it? Yes, of course I know it. Any sane demon wouldn't mistake it for someone else. The tall girl said one word at a time, the proof of the demon realm's supreme, the most dazzling demon jade on the 5 blood spirit crown. How could I not recognize it? The demon jade on the 5 blood spirit crown. Wang Lu was surprised because at this time, he recalled that when he gave the 5 blood spirits crown to Lan, there was no such a big red jade on the crown. The volume was obviously a lot smaller, and it didn't have the special effect of heating up. Therefore, he did not take it seriously at that time. Later, when he met that black demon and obtained this red jade pendant, he did not think about the 5 blood spirit crown. Unexpectedly, this red jade turned out to have such an origin. And when he thought about the competition for the 5 blood spirit crown, the legend about the blood crown, it is said that the person who obtains the blood crown can rule the demon realm. Yes, the master of the blood crown is the master of the demon realm. This is the law of the demon realm. Wang Lu pointed to himself, then in other words, I am, yes, you are the master of this land, and all sane demons on this land must obey your orders. As soon as this statement came out, not to mention Wang Lu, even the other chief disciples were surprised. Zhou Mumu said in surprise, Isn't this the great demon king? Xiang Liang also said, so, junior brother Wang Lu will become the supreme commander of the demon realm. Wang Lu was not so optimistic. That's only a theoretical possibility, right? Do you think it's possible that a piece of red jade can command a world? If it were you, if Chonghua holds the Wanxian League Golden Order of Supreme He too and wants you to tie the knot with Zhanzai, will you obey? Zhou Mumu was surprised. Don't make such malicious assumptions, okay? I have goosebumps all over my body. How could Supreme He too issue the Wanxian League Golden Order for such a boring thing? And even if he really issues it, I won't obey it. Although in theory no one disobeys the Golden Order, but at worst I can quietly kill that bitch Zhan Zai. He too can't let me marry a dead man, right? Zhan Zai was immediately unhappy. The effect of the Wanxian League Golden Order is based on the supreme credibility of the Wanxian League, which unifies the 9 regions immortal cultivation world. When you join the Wanxian League and enjoy all kinds of conveniences, you have to abide by its rules. You can't openly destroy this order just because of your own personal preferences. As the lead disciple of Kunlun's sect, you should have such awareness. In the face of Zhan Zai's serious competition, Zhou Mumu just turned her head sideways and curled up the corner of her mouth. Idiot. You. Wang Lu also advised senior brother Zai. If the Supreme really issues the order, will you really become senior sister Zhou's Taoist companion? Zhan Zai was stunned and then imagined the scene. Suddenly, his face turned livid. I will obey the order, but I will divorce her as soon as possible. You idiot, you actually dare to divorce me? Zhou Mumu angrily said. Wang Lu launched his non-phase sword defense, separated the two of them, and then said in short, even the Wanxian League Golden Order can't make you obey it wholeheartedly. Instead, you try to find a way to exploit loopholes. Then, I want to ask, how can a mere piece of red jade have such a great effect that it can make the demons obey it? Zhou Mumu said. Who knows about the demon world? But there must be basic logic, right? It can instantly brainwash the creatures of a world. Even a true immortal can't do it, but can a piece of red jade do it? Zhou Mumu was suddenly speechless. Moreover, Wang Lu said and then turned his head to look at the 2 girls kneeling on the ground. Just now, she said that all the sane demons on earth will listen to my order. In other words, most of the demons in the demon world are not sane, right? Chapter 462. Most of the creatures in the demon world were not sane? Wang Lu's assumption made the other 4 lead disciples frown, because this was really a weird assumption. In the mainstream rumors about the demon world in 9 regions, the demon race was a group of irrational killing machines. Their existence was to destroy all things in the world, especially the mortal enemy of human beings. The records of the first great war of immortals and demons were too vague. Perhaps there were still this and that. However, when it came to the Second Great War of Immortals and Demons, it was purely a massacre. If they had not experienced the struggle for the 5 blood spirit crown in the group of immortal tombs and personally witnessed the joy, anger, sorrow and joy of the demon race, it was indeed difficult to believe that they had human nature. But, while they were puzzled, the petite girl flatly said, yes, there are not many sane creatures left in the demon world. There was a kind of calmness in her tone of voice. Wang Lu looked at the empty space around him and suddenly thought, is it our fault? The petite girl raised her eyebrows, and her body slightly trembled, seeming to be emotionally unstable. However, compared to her previous posture of fighting naked, she was much calmer. The effect of the red jade seemed to be effective on her. However, it was unrealistic to expect her to calmly explain the whole story. Fortunately, the mood of the girl next to her was much more stable. The effect of the 5 blood spirit crown is the result of the law of the demon world. She softly said. And a large part of the law of the demon world comes from the eternal tree. Wang Lu asked, so when the eternal tree of the demon world is gone, the 5 blood spirit crown has lost its meaning? But it seems to be effective on you guys. Yes, because we are the guardians of the eternal tree. Although the eternal tree has been cut off, it has not been completely destroyed. At least here its effect is still there. In other words, as soon as we go out, you two will fight to the death with us. The demon girl raised her eyes, lowered her head, and said, human and demon have an irreconcilable blood feud. Shouldn't we be the ones to say that? Wang Lu shrugged. The demon girl said, I don't know how you humans recorded that part of history, but for us it was you who started the war first, and it was you who caused everything that happened afterwards. If you suffer any losses in the war between the 2 worlds, you only have yourself to blame. You brought this upon yourself? Zhou Mumu's anger flared up, but she was quickly stopped by Wang Lu. Wang Lu said, the historical record may not be accurate. We have an old saying in the 9 regions that history is a little girl who can be decorated by the victors. The demon girl said indifferently, "Then we are the victors to decorate her." Wang Lu was not surprised by this. To be able to become the guardian of the eternal tree, of course, he would not be an ordinary person. Not to mention, according to the history of the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown, the Grey Mountain lineage was the winner of the blood crown, the true Demon King bloodline. Then, have you seen this person? As Wang Lu spoke, he projected Haze's face with a spiritual spell. The girl had a red face and fangs, but it did not look ferocious. Instead, her serious face revealed a very heroic spirit. However, in front of him, her 2 descendants shook their heads. "I've never seen her." "Never? Don't you have a genealogy or something to record history?" "We don't need it because history is in our blood. I can be sure that there has never been such a member of our race. Although she looks like a member of my race, it's mostly something fabricated out of thin air by you human cultivators." History is in the blood? While Wang Lu was curious about the meaning of this sentence, Qianghua explained. The king of the demon world is recognized by the laws of the demon world, the monarch of the world. Before she could finish, Wang Lu interrupted. So they have the privilege of the laws, omniscient and omnipotent, and at the same time, their blood can inherit their memories, so that the descendants of the demon king can always maintain their superiority. Qianghua was not annoyed by being interrupted, but nodded in agreement with Wang Lu's speculation. Then she added, "The battle for the 5 blood spirits crown has other secrets." Wang Lu sneered and said, "Do you need to say that? Now we just need to wait for the result of the identification of the heavenly silk headscarf." When he first delved into the plot of the 36 chains, Wang Lu inadvertently triggered the hidden plot in Peach Garden Village and witnessed the reversal of history. As the evidence, the heavenly silk headscarf was taken away by Yin and Yang school's disciples, Tiandao Lan and the others, and then brought back to the sect to identify its authenticity. If it was really the most valuable treasure of Yin and Yang school, then the group of immortal tombs had created a miracle of time reversal. If it was not, then it meant that the heavenly silk headscarf had another origin. As a result, Tiandao Lan and the others never came back, and there was no accurate answer for several years. It was not that the people of Yin and Yang school intended to embezzle the heavenly silk headscarf, but after Tiandao Lan brought it back, the elders of Yin and Yang school tried their best to identify its authenticity. It stood to reason that the Nikhang feather coat was the most valuable treasure of Yin and Yang school, so as long as the heavenly silk headscarf was matched with the other parts, it could be identified by their compatibility. However, Yin and Yang school had experienced thousands of years of vicissitudes during which there were many upheavals. Although the Nikhang feather coat was the most valuable treasure of the sect, it had been repaired and transformed many times, so it was not the same as the original. This was also the last resort. The heavenly silk headscarf was lost too early, and the set lacked a key link, so its power would be greatly reduced. In order to make up for this part of the discount, the ancestors of Yin and Yang school had to constantly repair the other parts, so that it could become a whole again. However, today, when the heavenly silk headscarf was recovered, there was no place for it in the set, and all kinds of records about the original set had been lost in the long history. Relying solely on the eyes of modern people to identify it, it was really not possible to guarantee that it was accurate. Therefore, the elder of Yin and Yang school made a decision to go into seclusion to use the great divination technique to trace back the history and see the root. The great divination technique was an arduous test for any cultivator in the present age. Even Fengyin Taoist master, who was the best at divination, had to spend a lot of effort to cast it. The attainment of the elder of Yin and Yang school was far inferior to Fengyin, so the progress of his divination was very slow. Before going into seclusion, he estimated that it would take him 8 years. For an elder with a lifespan of more than 1,000 years, 8 years was just like a snap of the fingers, not to mention that this process could also further improve his divination technique. However, for Wang Lu, it meant that he could not expect to get a clear answer about the authenticity of the heavenly silk headscarf in a short period of time. It was still unknown whether the group of immortal tombs was a historical play or a drama. Therefore, the 2 demon race girls in front of him claimed that they had never seen Lan, which could not explain anything. In short, in the records of your royal family, The demon world is completely the victim? The demon race girl lightly responded, 2,000 years ago, human beings invaded the demon world. Taking advantage of the fact that my demon race was unprepared, they destroyed the eternal tree with blasphemy. Since then, the laws of the demon world collapsed, the mind of the creatures was blinded, and they became bloodthirsty. Some of the demons poured into the 9 regions along the passage between the 2 worlds, setting off a feast of revenge. Tell me, isn't this our own fault? Human beings invaded the demon world and took advantage of the fact that they were unprepared to destroy the eternal tree. And when the eternal tree fell, the laws of the demon world collapsed, making the demons crazily bloodthirsty, which set off the second war of immortals and demons. The demon race girl's short words shocked the chief disciple to the point of being speechless. As early as in the library of Kunlun Immortal Mountain, the several of them had learned that the relationship between the 9 regions and the demon world was by no means simple. There were many hidden secrets, but unexpectedly the hidden secrets were actually this shocking. If the eternal tree is still there, the laws of the demon world are still there. With this red jade you can rule the demon world, and from then on the 2 worlds of immortals and demons would coexist peacefully. No more bloodshed. Unfortunately, as early as 2,000 years ago, this possibility was personally destroyed by you human beings. You thought that by destroying the eternal tree, you could make the demon world sink forever, but the final collapse of the laws actually made you pay a painful price. The demon race girl said and then pointed to the top of her head. I don't know where you got the eternal tree sapling, nor do I know where you found the 5 spirit jade. If you want to easily conquer the demon world, then look, this is the land you conquered. Barren, desolate, only the black tide everywhere, and the demon race creatures that have lost their spirituality are not worthy to be called as living beings. I hope you like it. With the irreconcilable hatred between the immortals and demons, when he heard that the demon world had almost collapsed, Wang Lu of course should like it. But he just couldn't be happy. Similarly, even Xiong who was the most insistent on the distinction between immortals and demons, didn't have even half a smile on her face. This group of cultivators had been frequently instilled with the idea of the struggle between immortals and demons, since they embarked on the road of immortal cultivation. Even though no one thought that the third great war of immortals and demons would break out in their lifetime, this idea was deeply rooted. Now this deeply rooted idea finally began to collapse. In the silence, Zhou Mumu couldn't hold back her temper. What if? The girl hesitated and said, what if we rebuild the eternal tree? Look, we have a sapling with good growth potential here. If we transplant it here again. Before she could finish, Zhanzai interrupted, hey, it has already been combined with me. How can I transplant it? Zhou Mumu was not polite. Then I'll bury you alive here. It's a good thing for the demon world and the 9 regions. You women are simply unreasonable. Seeing that the 2 of them were about to quarrel again, the demon girl smiled and said, there is also a way to transplant it. The vitality of the eternal tree is tenacious. As long as the seeds and branches are cultivated in a specific way, they can grow again. And when the eternal tree is reborn, we can also expel the black tide little by little and rebuild the demon world civilization. This process will not even be particularly long. In just a few hundred years we can restore the prosperity that the demon world should have. But why do you want to do that? Right now, this demon world that has nothing but death is the most beneficial for you human beings, isn't it? As long as the passage between the 2 worlds is sealed, with the ability of these mindless creatures, they will never be able to threaten you. With that, she looked at Xiong again. As for the 2 of us, we are the last descendants of our race. Under the protection of the eternal tree ruins, we are struggling at death's door. But we have neither the power to reproduce nor the motivation to continue to survive. If nothing unexpected happens within 100 years, we and the shelter left by the eternal tree will disappear. The demon world will also be completely plunged into darkness. After that, the demon girl fell into silence. Similarly, the 5 lead disciples were also silent. Before the trip to the demon world, they had made all kinds of preparations. Even if they encountered the demon king, they had the corresponding means to deal with it. However, the current situation was even more tricky than fighting the demon king. In the end, it was Wang Lu who came forward to make the final decision. Very well, then we'll do as you say. The young man clapped his hands and pointed to the demon girl. You guys just wait for death here. We're going home to eat. With that, he turned his head and looked at Zhang Zai. Okay, send us back. Zhang Zai was stunned for a long time and then spread out his hands. No. Chapter 463. The grievances between Zhou Mumu and Zhang Zai began during the Five Blood Spirit Crown power struggle, and continued to this day. The two quarreled as soon as they saw each other, and when they quarreled they would fight. During this period it was difficult to say who was right and who was wrong. According to Wang Lu, it was best for the two to go back to their hometown and get married. At least he had always been in a neutral position. But now it seemed that Wang Lu finally understood Zhou Mumu's hostility to Zhang Zai. This grandson really deserved to be beaten. What do you mean you can't? Zhang Zai spread out his hands and said, I'm only responsible for coming here, not going back. It's easy to see from the analysis of the principle. I was able to open the passage through the resonance of the eternal tree. Now that we are in the demon world, there is no eternal tree in 9 regions that can resonate with me. So, Zhang Zai looked at Wang Lu strangely and said, So isn't it natural that I can't send everyone back? Junior brother Wang Lu, with your logical thinking ability, you can't even think of this small thing, right? Then with your logical thinking ability, you should be able to think that I'm not the only one who will beat you up later, right? Wang Lu shook his head and was too lazy to talk nonsense with this damn otaku. Instead, he turned his gaze to Zhou Mumu. The girl was also stunned. I thought one of you 4 would have a way. You should really go back to your hometown with Zhang Zai and get married. Then Wang Lu looked at Xiang Liang. Xiang Liang said, I can only guarantee my own return. I thought that in this trip to the demon world, each of us is responsible for our own return and return. Well, very well, you can forget about finding a wife in this life. In the end, Wang Lu could only look at Chonghua. Unexpectedly, Chonghua just frowned and said softly a moment later, There are some changes in the Kill Immortal sword. Although the meaning was a bit vague, how could Wang Lu not hear it? He nodded and said, In short, you are also a fucking cripple, right? With that, he saw the eyes of the 4 people around him. Obviously, the only hope now was Wang Lu. Wang Lu Zhenren Wang was the best at creating miracles and was almost omnipotent. Wang Zhenren sighed in his heart. This trip to the demon realm was really carried out by one god after another. It was really exciting. The situation had developed to this point, and looking at the plan he had prepared before coming here, a certain Howling clan member named Enesy, and the plan to use him to call the Flash clan to open the passage, it was really a slap in the face. At this time, not to mention the Howl race and the Flash race, even the Royal race couldn't protect themselves. Who would open the passage between the 2 worlds for him? At this point, I can only use my ultimate move to save my life. Wang Lu shook his head and reached out to pat Xiang Liang's shoulder. Senior brother Xiang Liang, after you return to 9 regions, please help me go to Spirit Sword Mountain and find a bitch named Wang Wu. Tell her that her one and only precious disciple is now trapped in the demon world. If she doesn't save him, she will have no descendants. Zhou Mumu was dumbfounded. Is this your life-saving move? Send someone back to the mountain to call for help. Xiang Liang didn't think too much about it. After gawking for a moment, he nodded vigorously. Rest assured, I will definitely bring the message. By the way, help me threaten her. If she would rather die than save me, then some of her secrets that she can't see will be widely spread to every corner of 9 regions 1 month after I lost contact with her. At that time, even if her skin is thick enough to not care about it, sect leader senior brother would definitely care about it. Then, she can forget about her position as an elder and her consecration. Xiang Liang carefully remembered these words. After thinking about it for a while, he was deeply impressed. Junior brother Wang Lu is really resourceful, thoughtful and meticulous. Zhou Mumu asked, 5th elder's secret that cannot be seen. Wang Lu spread out his hands and said, Actually it's nothing. With the thickness of her skin, all her secrets can be seen. But I believe that with her personality, she will always have a guilty conscience. If I trick her like this, I will probably succeed. You two, master and disciple, are really... Zhou Mumu shook her head. In short, even you can't do anything? Very well, if Xiang Liang can successfully bring reinforcements, of course that's good. Although I doubt it, it's better to let one go than to die here. As soon as her voice fell, Xiang Liang said, there is an unexpected change in the resonance of the battle spirit. The resonance transmission failed. Ha ha ha, what a good brother who shares weal and woe with you. You can still laugh. Wang Lu was about to speak when he suddenly heard the demon girl ask, do you want to leave? Yes, dear minister, do you have a good plan? The demon girl said, the passage between the two worlds has been closed 2,000 years ago, but just more than 100 years ago, there has been some change in the savage land at the border of the demon world. It seems that the edge of the entire demon world has become blurred. Perhaps you can find a way to leave there. More than 100 years ago, the edge of the demon world? Perhaps the demon world has reached the edge of destruction, and the structure of the world is no longer stable. Because it's too far away from here, we haven't personally seen it. We only know that more than 100 years ago, there was a great change in the demon world. Even if it's far away, we can still smell the stench from 9 regions. Tisk, more than 100 years ago, did the septic tank of 9 regions leak? Wang Lu shook his head and asked, in short, as long as we go along the edge, there is hope to find 9 regions, right? But now that the black tide is raging, what should we do? The surging of the black tide has a cycle. Although it has become more and more restless recently, at a specific time it will calm down, and that is the time for you to act. How long will it take to get to the edge of the demon world from here? The vastness of the world seemed boundless even for a Taoist master of Jindan's stage. Right now, the 9 regions had been almost explored by the cultivators, and each major traffic artery had a transmission array node. Even so, the journey across the continent was still extremely long. As for the demon world, even if the 5 of them desperately rushed, could they reach the edge before the arrival of the black tide? You guys have good luck. The demon girl said, if it was 2,000 years ago, with your cultivation base, you wouldn't be able to make it. But after 2,000 years, the land of the demon world has become narrower and narrower, and the edge continues to collapse and penetrate. With the current situation, perhaps you guys can still make it. TSK, is this a racing game? Wang Lu suddenly had a headache. He was good at offense and defense, but he was not good at racing. We can take you. The tall demon girl suddenly said, our speed is very fast. Oh, then I'll have to trouble you. Wang Lu was not polite. Right now, he was the king of the demon world. Although this king only had 2 lonely and precarious demon girls, since they volunteered, there was no reason not to use them. In terms of speed, this pair of demon girls was indeed far above the several lead disciples. However, the petite girl was surprised and immediately pulled her companion's hand. Sister, are you crazy? Being loyal to the king is our mission that we have been waiting for our whole life, the tall girl lightly said, her eyes turning to Wang Lu, and he is our king. But he is a human after all? The demon jade fell into the hands of a human cultivator, and then miraculously appeared in front of us. I believe there must be a reason behind this. The 2 sisters stared at each other for a long time. In the end, the younger sister was the first to give up. Well, I'll listen to you. 2 days later, the black tide on the ground finally dissipated, and the unique blood-red light of the demon world once again shrouded the earth. Wang Lu and the others also embarked on their journey. Along the way, they were accompanied by 2 demon girls. They flew at the front of the team, dragging behind them 5 chains of light, which were as gorgeous as a rainbow. However, behind the beautiful scenery, it was actually 2 young girls dragging the 5 chief disciples forward like animals pulling a cart. After taking off their armors, their speed was even faster than Zhanzai's thunder body, so they were duty-bound to take on the heavy responsibility of pulling the carriage. Today's demon world had greatly shrunk, and its area was only a fraction of that before the collapse of the eternal tree. And if the 2 demon girls ran at full speed, it would only take them half a day to reach the edge of the eternal tree ruins in the center of the demon world. According to the usual pattern, the interval between the arrival of the black tide was 2 to 3 days, which was more than enough time. In theory, as long as they continued to move along the edge, They could find the road to 9 regions. With the keenness of the several lead disciples, it was not impossible for them to detect it. And once they entered 9 regions, they could activate their respective sects' heavenly talismans and teleport back to the mountain. During the half-day journey, Wang Lu tried to talk to the 2 girls, but was rejected by the other party with the reason that they needed to devote all their attention to flying. Wang Lu saw that they really didn't want to talk, so he didn't use the power of the demon jade to strictly restrain them. In any case, after half a day, they would be separated from each other, minding their own business. The harvest from this trip to the demon world was enough. If there was no special reason, he believed that he would not come to this destroyed land for a long time. In other words, after half a day, he would have to say goodbye to the 2 demon girls forever. However, just as he was thinking, the speed of the demon girls in front of him suddenly slowed down. Wang Lu somewhat strangely asked, "What happened?" "It's in front." As the elder sister, the demon girl pointed forward and saw a strange starlight flickering on the horizon. The light was distorted and broken there, which happened to outline a scene of space disorder. "Is this the scene at the edge of the world? It's really a rare spectacle in life," Wang Lu said, and then urged, "There is still the last part of the road. I will have to trouble the 2 of you to work harder and help me to the end." Who knew that the elder sister shook her head. "I can't do it." "Can't do it?" Wang Lu discovered that the bodies of the 2 demon girls were trembling slightly and quickly, as if they were enduring great pain and weakness. "We were able to survive the cataclysm under the protection of the eternal tree." The voice of the demon girl was intermittent and getting weaker. "So we can't be too far away from the eternal tree, otherwise, we won't be able to maintain our existence. Originally, I thought that my sister and I could persist until the end, but it seems that we can't do it." At this point, the bodies of the 2 demon girls began to ooze blood, and their bodies were on the verge of collapsing. Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. "You should have said this earlier. Why do you have to risk your life like this?" With that, he tried to take out a life-saving pill, but the demon girl shook her head. "The medicine of human cultivators is ineffective on us. Recently, the black tide has been descending more and more frequently, and the interval between them may not be more than 2 or 3 days. With just you 2, it's too late." The demon girl finished speaking and then knelt down on the ground. Her body continued to be reduced to ashes. "Moreover, I hope that you can always remember this place. Don't forget it so quickly." With that, the 2 demon race girls vanished into thin air and were carried away by the wind. At the last moment, Wang Lu didn't even know their names, but he knew that he would probably remember this place forever. Chapter 464. The edge of the demon world was already right in front of them. The broken starry sky flickered in front of them, and the fragments of space fluttered disorderly. The rolling red clouds in the sky reflected the fire, illuminating the future. There was no surprise or danger along the way. It seemed that the black tide that wreaked havoc in this world was too late to stop the lead disciple of the Wanxian League from going home. It was undoubtedly a gratifying thing to get important information in the demon world and return triumphantly. However, along the way, the 5 of them were silent, and they could not squeeze out even a little bit of joy on their faces. The sacrifice of the 2 demon girls was like a heavy burden, which made it difficult for them to breathe. Even Qiong Hua, who had the most extreme standpoint of immortal and demon race, seemed listless. The 2 demon girls had indeed succeeded. Although they didn't even leave their names behind, their resolute figures were forever engraved in people's minds. It was not the heart demon, but it was better than the heart demon. The demon race was indeed the race that was best at playing with the heart demon, and this was even more so for the royal family of the demon race. In silence, the 5 of them finally entered the broken space. From the moment they set foot on the edge of the world, even if they didn't have the energy, they had to raise their spirits to deal with all the changes. The space here was broken, and there were hidden dangers everywhere. If they were not careful, they might be cut into minced meat by the fragments of the space. If the 5 of them could be safe and sound in the demon world where the black tide raged, it would be too ironic if they eventually fell at the finish line. However, unexpectedly, when they approached the edge of the world, They found that the performance of the space was far calmer than expected. The dazzling starlight seemed to come from a distant place. This should be the edge of the world, right? There should be a void in front of us, right? Zhou Mumu asked doubtfully. Why do I feel that there seems to be a strong vitality in front of us? Oh, is it because you're about to give birth? Wang Lu casually responded. Don't think that because we have a good friendship, I'm not willing to hit you. Perhaps 9 regions is in front of us? The 2 worlds have merged with each other, so you feel the vitality from 9 regions? Wang Lu's perception was not keen, so he just casually guessed. It's not the same. I don't smell the smell of 9 regions at all. It's all the stench of demon race. Just as Zhou Mumu finished speaking, Zhan Zai also exclaimed in surprise. All the indicators here are abnormal. It can't be explained with any current theories. Yes, you can consider staying here to study for 1 or 200 years. We will remember to burn incense for you in 9 regions. Compared with Zhou Mumu and Zhan Zai, who like to cause trouble, Wang Lu just wanted to return to 9 regions as soon as possible. This trip to the devil world was really too unpleasant. Thereupon he took the lead and propped up the broken space with his non-phase sword defense. And under the protection of the non-phase sword defense, no evil could invade. A few chief disciples walked beside Wang Lu, feeling this gentle yet tenacious sword qi, each of them comprehending something in their hearts. While walking, Chonghua suddenly said, Junior brother Wang's non-phase sword defense seems to have improved again. Among the present age cultivators, I'm afraid no one can penetrate your non-phase sword defense with the same cultivation base. With the relationship between Wang Lu and Chonghua, it was hard to imagine that she would express her praise and affirmation of Wang Lu without concealment. However, if one was familiar with Chonghua, they would know that this was Chonghua's pride as a sword cultivator. Because of her pride, she was not stingy with the praise of others, because no matter how much praise there was, it could not shake her confidence in herself. Similarly, because of her pride, she could not tolerate herself to do something too petty. The perfection of Wang Lu's non-phase sword defense was obvious to all. Even if she didn't say it, could the other chief disciples not see it? Wang Lu himself was a bit surprised by this. He glanced at Chonghua and sneered, but he didn't bicker with her as usual. Non-phase sword defense was indeed powerful, but to say that it was invincible on the same level was also a joke. Perhaps with Chonghua's swordsmanship, without using the kill immortal sword, she was powerless against Wang Lu. However, Wang Lu clearly knew that on Spirit Sword Mountain, there were 2 girls who absolutely had the ability to penetrate his non-phase sword defense with the same cultivation base. Although the IQ of the 2 of them combined was not as high as that of Chonghua's, otherwise, he would not have been valued by the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, and would have been nurtured as the sect's lead disciple even before his cultivation had taken shape. While he was thinking about it, suddenly the front suddenly opened up. It turned out that the group of people had unknowingly crossed the chaotic edge of the world, and came to a new world. It was just that, in the face of the new world, the group of people was stunned and completely speechless. What is this place? Zhou Mumu subconsciously walked to the front of the team, and cast a variety of Kunlun immortal method on her eyes. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could not see what she wanted. What entered her field of vision was a rich and prosperous land. Several of them were standing on the top of a high mountain. At the foot of the mountain was a bustling city. The majestic city wall was like a mountain that wrapped the city, but it could not isolate the vitality of the city. The city was bustling with activity and bustling with noise. Although the style of the city was unique and even strange, the prosperity of the people here was also an eye-opener. In 9 regions, those first-tier cities were just like this. However, Zhou Mumu was very sure that this city was by no means any city in 9 regions, because there was no city in the 9 regions where millions of demons lived. But these fiend races' actions made people completely unable to fathom. Zhou Mumu clearly saw a group of more than 10 tall and sturdy demons with bone spurs on their backs walking on the spacious street. From time to time, they curiously looked at the dense buildings on both sides of the street. Beside these tall and sturdy demons, there were several groups of gray mist lingering around, and from time to time they made a sharp sound. They were also a member of the demon race, a demon race that did not have a complete entity and was best at attacking the mind, close to the heart demon. However, these mist-like demons were not quarreling with the tall and sturdy demons, but persuading them to enter their own shops and buy goods. Most of the buildings on both sides of the street were demon race shops, and the dazzling array of goods were placed in the open display cabinets for people to appreciate. A tall and sturdy bone demon stopped and communicated with the fog demon in a muffled voice. Then he took out 2 burning coins from the leather bag at his waist and threw them on the counter. He then took off a gorgeous hat and put it on his head. His companions turned around one after another and commented on him. Then a few of them were tempted, and each of them paid for a similar hat to wear on their heads, all of them laughing foolishly. Such a peaceful and warm scene, if it happened in the human world of 9 regions, no one would be surprised because it was the daily life of the people of 9 regions. However, when it came to the demon race, how could there be such a gentle and orderly demon race in the world? The tall and sturdy bone demon was the vanguard of the demon race in the war of immortals and demons. They did not know pain or fatigue. They would persist in killing until they could no longer move. Their mind was only filled with killing and torture. At the same time, the civilization of the bone demon race was also at an extremely primitive level. They didn't even know the basic barter. If they liked something, they would rob it. If someone tried to stop them, they would kill it. If they couldn't kill it, they would die. They had always been unafraid of death. And how could such a bone demon honestly pay for a purchase? Why would he buy a fancy hat? As for the fog demon, it had also made countless cultivators of 9 regions gnash their teeth. They were insidious and despicable, best at playing with people's hearts and sowing discord. For them, being despicable and dark was their nature. Even among their own race, there was endless infighting. How could they honestly run a shop and solicit business? When the bone demon and the fog demon met, if there was no suppression from a higher-level demon race, the most common situation was that they would fight each other to the death. Am I seeing things? Zhou Mumu couldn't believe her eyes, but everything in front of her was undeniable. Therefore, she couldn't understand it at all. What is this place? The same question emerged in the minds of the 5 people at the same time. This warm but strange scene not only did not make them calm down, but also doubled their vigilance. However, at this time, several flashes of light suddenly flew from the city wall to the top of the mountain in the blink of an eye, and then arrived in front of Wang Lu and the others. They were on full alert. Among them, Xiang Liang couldn't help but want to strike first. It was not difficult to judge the strength of these people through their speed. They were not the kind of enemy that could be easily taken down. Instead of passively defending, it was better to strike first. However, Xiang Liang's attack was stopped by Wang Lu. There were so many powerful enemies in a single city, so rashly making a move would only lead to death. This place was not like the previous desolate demon world. No matter how earth-shattering the fight was, as long as they turned around and hid their tracks, they would be safe. However, in a highly developed place, once they were the focus of attention, there was no possibility of hiding. Moreover, since they inexplicably came here from the edge of the world, the red jade pendant on their chest began to heat up. Therefore, Wang Lu thought it was best not to rush to make a move. Soon, things proved that his judgment was not wrong. After those flashes of light flew close, they quickly turned into humanoid shapes. 3 of them were green-skinned feather race and 1 black-skinned ink race. The ink race and the feather race were famous during the Great War of the Immortals and Demons. They were a famous master-follower race. The ink race was the leader, and their skin was as black as ink. During battle, they could turn their skin into indestructible black jade. The feather race, on the other hand, were skilled at flying and extremely fast. Several feather race and 1 demon could form a killing machine with both attack and defense. This group of 4 demons was a standard master-follower combination. However, unlike the records of the Great War of the Immortals and Demons where the main race and the follower race viewed each other with hatred, the 4 of them seemed harmonious and loving. When they saw Wang Lu and the others, they were extremely surprised. Then they began to discuss in low voices. For heads together, they seemed to be extremely close. Then the leader of the ink race spoke. Although he spoke in the language of the demon race, the chief disciples all understood. Did you come here from the land of destruction? Chapter 465. Land of Destruction? Upon hearing this word, the several lead disciples were moved. Before coming to this strange world, the demon world where the black tide wreaked havoc was indeed worthy of the title of Land of Destruction. But if that was the Land of Destruction, what was this place now? Or rather, what exactly was going on here? After leaving the demon world, they should have returned to 9 regions, so why would there suddenly be such an episode? While the several lead disciples had different thoughts, Wang Lu had already opened his mouth and said in proficient demon language, "We are from the Eternal Village, where is this place?" While speaking, his expression showed just the right amount of confusion and blankness. The so-called Eternal Village was a popular name for the world in which the demon race lived. At this time, Wang Lu was going to play the role of an inhabitant of the demon world. Before setting out from 9 regions to the demon world, the several lead disciples had cast a spell to disguise themselves as demons, and the core of the spell was the harvest from the group of immortal tombs. The camouflage effect was almost flawless. Even the 2 royal family members of the demon race only saw the flaw in their conversation. At present, Ink Demon and Feather Demon were naturally powerless. After listening to Wang Lu's explanation, the Ink Demon opened his mouth in surprise, revealing several rows of fine teeth. Eternal Village? You guys really came from the Land of Destruction? I can't believe there are still living compatriots there. This is really unexpected. While speaking, the Feather Demon behind the Ink Demon also became excited. Living inhabitants of the old demon world? Oh my god, this is big news that hasn't happened in many years, and we are the first to witness it. We are going to be famous. Say, if those magazine reporters come to interview us, how can we tell the story and show ourselves at the same time? After we become famous, will there be businessmen looking for us to endorse their products? The conversation between the Feather Race members contained a great deal of information, so much so that even Wang Lu was unable to fully react in time. You said Old Demon World? What does that mean? The Ink Demon said with a smile, of course it's because here the place you see is called the New Demon World. A land that brings a new life to the demon race. New Demon Realm? Mo said, it's a long story to tell in detail. You look travel-worn. Your life in the Old Devil Realm must have been very difficult, right? To be able to pass through the spatial barrier and come here, how much suffering must he have gone through? Why don't you follow us into the city to rest? I'll tell you the ins and outs of the matter. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I am the guard captain of Xanarkand. Just now, I saw that there was a change in the space on the mountain, so I brought my brothers here to investigate. I really found a great person. With that said, the Ink Man laughed again. The New Demon Realm hasn't seen a visitor from the old world for over 1,000 years. It's really my good luck to be able to find you at the first instance. After a pause, he suddenly asked, can I use my name to name you? Under the greeting of several guards of Lucca City, Wang Lu and his party officially entered this incredible demon city, Xanarkand. The Ink Demon arranged accommodation and food for them, and fully considered the cultivation of several people. The accommodation was arranged in a treasured place with all 5 elements, and the food was both delicious and nourishing medicinal cuisine. This also surprised Wang Lu and the others, because according to the customs of the demon race, blood pools and fresh meat seemed more suitable to entertain guests. Not long after they settled in Xanarkand with an uneasy mood, a higher-level demon came forward to entertain them. He was also an Ink Demon, but he was more mature and stronger than the guard captain. The guard captain was roughly equivalent to the peak of the human king pill, and this older demon was at least half a step into the deity stage. The level division of the demon race was different from that of humans, but the embodiment of strength was similar. He claimed to be the advisor of the city lord of Xanarkand. Xanarkand was indeed an incredible city. The strongest person at the peak of the king pill could only serve as the guard captain, but the advisor of the city lord was actually at the deity stage. And how powerful was the city lord himself? Just a city had such strong strength. How many things were hidden in this new demon world? With these questions, Wang Lu and his party sat down at the dining table, and the older advisor of the city lord did not have the slightest arrogance of a deity stage powerhouse. He warmly entertained them at the dining table, and his conversation was excellent. He explained the origin of the new demon world to Wang Lu and his party in detail. This land is truly a blessed land bestowed by the heavens. As he spoke, this elder devil's thoughts drifted back to a long, long time ago. At that time, the demon world had just suffered a catastrophe that destroyed the world. The eternal tree that supported the existence of the world was completely destroyed by blasphemous things, and even the laws of the demon world collapsed. Many creatures of the devil race died in the mutation, and even more went crazy, becoming bloodthirsty. At that time, the civilization that the demon world had accumulated for thousands of years could be destroyed at any time. Wang Lu and the others could not help but nod. This history was exactly the same as what the pair of royal sisters said. But the twist that happened later was unexpected. At that time, there was a big disagreement in the demon world. Some people decided to guard the wreckage of the eternal tree. The eternal tree was indeed the greatest creature in the 3,000 worlds. Even if it was destroyed by blasphemous things, its remains could still support a peaceful and comfortable space. But that was a slow path to death, and the shelter that the eternal tree could provide was very limited. In addition to the royal family, the number of places that the other demons could enter to receive shelter was very limited. So at that time, many people decided to explore the outside world. Hearing this, they could not help but be surprised, because the pair of royal sisters had never said anything about this. Seeing the astonishment of Wang Lu and the others, the advisor smiled slightly. You are the new generation of the land of destruction after the great collapse, so you don't know much about what happened in the past. I'm afraid your ancestors would not have mentioned this to you. At that time, the demons hiding in the Eternal Tree Refuge did not believe that their compatriots who went out to explore could find a way to survive. The Eternal Tree of the demon world fell, and the laws of heaven and earth collapsed. No matter how you look at it, it was a dead end. And hiding in a safe place and watching your compatriots die is not something worth publicizing and passing on to future generations. Hearing this, Wang Lu had roughly figured out the context of the story. Later, those who went out to explore found this place? The consultant didn't answer him directly. Instead, he sighed with emotion. Those ancestors who dared to go out back then were the true elites of the demon world. They were powerful and could maintain their sanity after the laws of heaven and earth collapsed, leading more demons to strive for survival. More importantly, they had the responsibility of being elites, were not afraid of sacrifice, and moved forward bravely. At that time, there were more than 10 teams that went out to explore, but only 2 teams succeeded in finding this place. The rest of the exploration teams all failed, and many of them could have spent the rest of their lives under the shelter of the Eternal Tree. With that, he raised his glass. To the ancestors. Wang Lu hesitated for a moment before also raising his glass. At this moment, he was playing the role of an actor, dutifully playing the role of a demon, and the slight hesitation when he held the wine glass was just right, vividly playing the mentality of the residents of the old realm of devils. This made Zhou Mumu and the others stare in disbelief. At this time, they remembered that Wang Lu's real rise to fame was really based on his superb acting skills. When he competed with Lu Li for the lead disciple position on Spirit Sword Mountain, his strength was far inferior to the other party, but with an amazing deception, Lu Li suffered a crushing defeat. However, only Wang Lu himself knew that he was really a bit stunned, because in the advisor's story, he always felt that there were some problems. We are lucky. After putting down the glass, the advisor said, in this land, we recuperated and rebuilt our civilization, and this place is indeed like a blessed land given to us by the heavens, even more fertile than the original demon world. It only took us 2,000 years to become more powerful than before. For the future generations, it is like a blessing in disguise. Become more powerful than before, this sentence made people have to pay attention to it. The power of Zanarkand had been witnessed. Then in the new demon world, how many cities like Zanarkand were there? How many advantages did 9 regions have compared to the new demon world? In the future, if the third great war of immortals and demons broke out, what were the odds of winning? While thinking, the advisor asked, how many survivors are there in the old demon world? Wang Lu replied, we are the last batch. The protection effect of the Eternal Tree has completely disappeared. After that, the advisor asked about some details of life in the old demon world. Under Wang Lu's superb improvisation, he didn't find any flaws at all. I see. The advisor nodded. We have considered sending people to the old demon world, but the space barrier is too strong. It's easy to go from the old demon world to the new demon world, but it's almost impossible to go back. In short, welcome to Xanarkand. Try to adapt to life in the new demon world. I believe you will like it here. Wang Lu and the others could only smile wryly. It was good to meet a hospitable host in a foreign land, but if the host was a demon, the feeling of these human cultivators would be particularly subtle. Xianghua put down the glass and was about to ask about the passage from this world to other worlds, but the advisor waved his hand and said, "Well, you've had a hard journey, so I won't disturb your rest. After the meal, rest in your room. Tomorrow morning, I will send someone to take you to familiarize yourself with Xanarkand." After that, he floated away, leaving only a confident and unrestrained back. As the advisor of the city master, of course, it was easy for him to be busy, but the opportunity for Xianghua to find out the truth slipped away. Familiarize themselves with Xanarkand? The 5 human cultivators were not interested in familiarizing themselves with the demon race city. Compared with exploring the city, they were more looking forward to returning to 9 regions as soon as possible and reporting everything about their trip to the demon world to their sect. Chapter 466. We are trapped, right? At the dining table, Zhou Mumu said while flipping a pearl-like fish with chopsticks in boredom. However, it was knocked away by Wang Lu's chopsticks. Why are you stirring with your saliva chopsticks? Are you showing off your Kunlun immortal cultivation technique? Is your saliva fragrant? Isn't it disgusting? Zhou Mumu actually had something on her mind and acted subconsciously. After hearing Wang Lu's words, her face suddenly turned red. She slammed her chopsticks on the table and said, "I don't need to eat, okay?" However, thanks to Wang Lu's disturbance, the anxiety in the girl's heart also calmed down a little. "I say," Zhou Mumu spoke again, "what should we do next? Since we are already here, let's take things as they come. First, let's familiarize ourselves with Xanarkand, and then live in peace for a while." As Wang Lu said this, he began to eat without hesitation. Just now, the people at the dining table did not have much appetite, so there was 70 to 80% of the food left, which benefited Wang Lu. "You still have the mood to eat?" Zhou Mumu said anxiously. "And we are just a few humans. What's the matter if we live in the demon city for a long time? Otherwise," Wang Lu asked, "escape in the middle of the night? Are you afraid that we, the residents of the old world in the land of destruction, are not conspicuous enough? You have seen the strength of Xanarkand. A city consultant is close to a soul formation stage master. Once we are targeted as suspicious targets, do you think we can escape?" Xianghua also said, "This matter indeed needs to be considered in the long run. Acting rashly will only put us in danger, and this city. I am also very interested in learning more about it. Didn't we come to the demon world to explore its secrets?" Since Wang Lu and Xianghua said so, the matter was basically settled. The 5 of them temporarily settled in Xanarkand and acted according to the situation. Early the next morning, there was indeed someone arranged by the city consultant who came to serve them. It was not an outsider, but the guard captain of Xanarkand who first discovered them. "Haha, we meet again." The leader of the Ink clan had a bright smile on his face. His black face and white teeth reminded Wang Lu of his 7th martial uncle. "The last time we parted ways, I didn't have time to introduce myself. I'm Abia. I'm here to be your tour guide under the orders of the Lord Advisor," Abia said, looked up and down at Wang Lu and the others, and then repeatedly exclaimed in admiration, "Wearing our Xanarkand clothes is really more pleasing to the eye. Yesterday when we first picked you up, it was like an unearthed cultural relic. But for us, you, the inhabitants of the old world, are actually almost like cultural relics." As soon as he finished speaking, Aba froze for a moment. Then he slapped his head repeatedly. "I'm sorry, I've always been a straightforward person. I'm not discriminating against you because Sir Advisor has repeatedly told me that I'm not allowed to discriminate, ha ha ha." As he spoke, Aba took the initiative to step forward and pat Wang Lu on the shoulder. "Although the few of you are from the remote and backward old world, I will bring you to adapt to the real civilized world as soon as possible. Since you can survive in the old world until the end, you should be talented. As long as you are willing to integrate here, you will soon find your place. Believe me, when the time comes, you will fall in love with Zanarkand." With this talkative tour guide, the rest of the time was noisy and fulfilling. Although ABA was a straightforward person and seemed to have a very limited level of intelligence, he was absolutely qualified to be a tour guide. His official position was the guard captain of Zanarkand, so he was very familiar with every corner of the city. He led Wang Lu and the others to tour the city in an orderly manner while introducing the long history of Zanarkand. From the introduction, Wang Lu had gradually outlined the whole picture of the new demon world in his mind. This was a highly civilized place. There were at least 20 to 30 cities like Zanarkand in the new demon world. Among them, the most prosperous and affluent central city was 10 times larger than Zanarkand. It had even surpassed Shangjing City in 9 regions. At the same time, the new demon world was full of geniuses and powerful people. The city master of Zanarkand was a well-known great demon lord, but he was not even in the top 50 in the entire new demon world. The great demon king located in the central city suppressed this world with his tyrannical strength that was close to the level of breaking through the void. According to the records left behind during the Great War of Immortals and Demons, the demon lord level of demon race corresponded to a Taoist master of deity stage, and the great demon lord was peak deity stage. Such a cultivation base could not be ranked in the top 50 in the new demon world. Although it could not be concluded that the strength of this world was stronger than that of 9 regions, after all, it was still shrouded in yin and yang. What was really surprising was that the civilization of the new demon world was established in just 2,000 years. From the initial few survivors of the old demon world to the present 2,000 years sounded incredible. Because in 9 regions, even in the golden age of the fastest recovery of civilization, the achievements of the demon race were not as amazing as those of the current demon race. And for this question, ABA proudly gave the answer. Because the inhabitants of the new demon world are completely different from the demons of the past. We will no longer waste our energy on boring infighting and fighting. Instead, we will use all our strength to build our home. Without fighting and infighting, isn't that the great harmony of the world? Zhou Mumu somewhat incredulously asked. Because no matter in which record, the demon race was famous for their infighting. Even in the battle for the 5 blood spirit crown, the war between the 5 great demon races was very tragic. To say that the demon race didn't know how to fight was simply a fantasy. However, Abia was very sure. In the past 2,000 years, there has never been a war in the new demon world. With that, he deliberately pointed to 2 sturdy demons walking side by side on the street. "Do you see them?" Wang Lu looked at the 2 sturdy demons, one with brown skin and the other with silver skin. However, both of them were muscular just like rock puppets. Their bodies were covered with long hair, and their whole body exuded a strong aura. Their relationship seemed to be intimate, and they seemed to be twins. Unfortunately, Wang Lu was not familiar with this hairy demon, so he just nodded silently and waited for ABA's next words. Silver demons and gray demons are irreconcilable enemies in the old world. Their ancestors formed a blood feud because of fighting for territory, which has been passed down from generation to generation. However, in the new demon world, all the hatred was written off. Now the relationship between silver demons and gray demons is well known. TSK, look at that model couple. Their relationship is really enviable. Wait, what do you mean by model? ABA looked back at Wang Lu strangely. Model couple, a man and a woman. It's easy to tell, right? Look at how intimate they are. As they spoke, the 2 muscular giants who were walking side by side hugged each other tightly. Their sturdy muscles were tightly pressed against each other, and their thick hair interweaved together, becoming indistinguishable from each other. Their sweat reflected a sparkling and translucent light. The 2 huge heads pressed against each other, and they started kissing passionately. Wang Lu immediately poked his eyes. Damn, my eyes are going blind. Zhou Mumu's face was pale. My breakfast seems to be coming out. Qianghua slightly turned her head and suppressed the urge to use the kill immortal sword with her supreme immortal heart. Zhanzai inexplicably looked at the 2 muscular demons, not understanding why his companions had such a big reaction. Only Xiangliang smiled and nodded. Great family interaction. What's so great about it? Wang Lu questioned. ABA laughed and said, for the inhabitants of the old demon world, this scene is incredible, right? But this is the charm of the new demon world. Here there is no hatred and contradiction. Every day is like a dream. No hatred? Not even with human beings? Wang Lu suddenly asked. Upon hearing this, ABA was startled. Human beings? Yes, could it be that the new demon world has also left behind the hatred with human beings? Wang Lu asked seriously. This was also the question that he really cared about. The prosperity of the new demon world actually had little to do with him. However, if this powerful world still remembered the irreconcilable hatred between the immortals and demons, it would be a huge disaster for 9 regions. Upon hearing this question from Wang Lu, the other lead disciples also raised their spirits and waited for ABA's answer. Even though ABA was only the captain of a city guard, as a resident of the new demon world, his idea was the most representative. Of course, ABA lightly said, even the gray demon and the silver demon can become husband and wife, so what about the hatred between us and human beings? They destroyed our home and slaughtered hundreds of millions of demons. Wang Lu appropriately reminded. But because of this we also found the new demon world, a world that is far more prosperous than the old demon world. And speaking of slaughter, we have also killed a lot of human beings. ABA said with a slightly serious face, I know that you guys come from the old demon world, and many of your ideas are still the old ideas. But I want to say, if you want to integrate into the new demon world, you must leave behind the hatred of the past, all of it. Because hatred will only continue to breed new hatred, and it will not bring any valuable results. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned. Was this the line that the demon race would say? It was simply enough to shake one's worldview. But what if the human beings can't let go of their hatred and take the initiative to seek revenge? Wang Lu continued to ask. You think too much, they can't come. ABA laughed and said, the space barrier of the new demon world is unbreakable. The only way to connect to the outside world is to the old demon world. As for other places, even the cultivation base of the demon god can't break the barrier. How could human beings come in? Of course, because of this space barrier we can't enter the 9 regions. But the new demon world is so good. It's simply a dreamlike place. Who would want to go to the human world? I want to thank you. Wang Lu roared inwardly. Since we're already here, we should just take things as they come. We're here to travel, not to apply for a green card. Chapter 467. In the blink of an eye, it had been 2 years since Wang Lu and the others came to the new demon world. Of course, this 2 years was subjective, while the objective time was only 2 days. It was really a group of human cultivators living in the demon race's territory, which could be said to be like a year. The new demon world was indeed a dreamland. In just 2 days, under the guidance of the tour guide ABA, Wang Lu and the others had seen all kinds of incredible things, witnessed a brilliant demon race civilization, and deeply realized how the demon race of the new demon world stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, all of this did not help to solve a real problem. I say, can we still go back? In the residence, Zhou Mumu's voice seemed a bit depressed. Life in the new demon world was safer and more comfortable than expected. Their disguise was not seen through, and they were still regarded as the remnants of the old demon world, receiving meticulous care. Of course, according to the speculation of Wang Lu and Xiong, it was also possible that their identity had long been seen through, but the demon race of the new demon world had really let go of their hatred of human beings. Not only they were not hostile, but they also used this way to guide them to integrate into the new demon world. In any case, they could not go back, so they might as well settle here with the identity of the demon race. However, this was not what the 5 of them wanted. In these 2 days they asked all the people they could ask. Even yesterday they even asked the city's consultant. The answer they got was that there was no possibility of contact between the new demon world and 9 regions. The answer was simply desperate, so the 5 of them felt like a year. Don't worry, we will definitely go back. Wang Lu said softly. Really? Why are you so confident? You heard the situation yesterday, even the great demon king could not open the space barrier. Do we have to cultivate here until we reach Mahayana stage, cross the heavenly tribulation, and then break through the void? After a series of questions, Zhou Mumu realized that her mentality was a bit abnormal. Thus she raised her spiritual energy and swept her jade mansion, and her immortal heart regained its clarity. Sorry, I lost my composure. I'm just curious. Where does your confidence come from? Wang Lu spread out his hands. Who said I have confidence? I just said a few cheap words to coax a fool. Zhou Mumu shook her head helplessly and then no longer had the interest to talk. At this moment, ABA's laughter came from outside again. Haha everyone, I'm here again. Wang Lu opened the door curiously. Didn't you say that the tour guide would only last until yesterday? We'll be free to do whatever we want from today onwards? ABA nodded. That's true. But I forgot to tell you something important before I left yesterday, so I had to come here early in the morning to tell you. What is it? During this time you can move around Xanarkand at will. You can even leave the city and go to other places. But you must remember one thing. When you hear the horn in the evening, no matter where you are, you must rush back to the city as soon as possible. Then you must close your doors and rest in the buildings. You must not go out, let alone leave the protection of the city. ABA said very seriously. At the same time he took out a few more rings. This is prepared in case you don't hear the horn. When the horn sounds, the ring will heat up, and you will know that it is time to return to the city immediately. Wang Lu took the ring and asked casually, will there be a military exercise soon? Ebi shook his head and denied. The new demon world stands aloof from worldly affairs. We don't even have an army. How can there be a military exercise? We, the guards, only provide daily convenience services. We have never fought with anyone. The reason I want you to return to the city is that every time the horn sounds, something will happen that night. If you don't hide well, you may die without a burial place. Die without a burial place? Wang Lu was even more curious. As he learned more about the new demon world, he felt that it was more and more like a fairyland on earth. All beautiful words could be used to describe it. Die without a burial place seemed too strange. Yes, die without a burial place, ABA reiterated. When the horn sounds, you must return to the city as soon as possible. Otherwise, there will be a disaster. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was baffled. Is this the rule set by the great demon king? This is the rule of the new demon world, ABA said. Every once in a while, when the night falls, the wind of destruction will blow in the new demon world. Any creature walking in the night will be taken away by the wind of destruction. No matter how high your cultivation is or how powerful you are, there is no exception. For example, ABA looked at Wang Lu strangely. This question was really uncomfortable, but he just thought that the people of the old demon world were lacking in etiquette and did not think too much about it. For example, when we first came to the new demon world, when everyone didn't know much about the wind of destruction, there was a royal family who was involved in it. They also didn't survive. Even the royal family couldn't survive. The royal family of the new demon world was different from the two sisters who were struggling at death's door in the old demon world. Each of them had at least the cultivation of the peak of divinity transformation, but they couldn't survive the wind of destruction. This new demon world seemed to have a terrifying side besides its brilliance. But as long as you stay at home when the wind of destruction blows, there will be no problem. The girl smiled sweetly. Well said. You're indeed the lead disciple of the 10,000 Arts sect, which has the best academic research in 9 regions. I support you, you must study it well. Zhanzai narrowed his eyes. He always felt that Zhou Mumu was up to no good, but he didn't know where her viciousness came from. Qianghua pondered and said, the wind of destruction that comes every few days reminds me of the black tide of the old demon world. Is there any connection between the two? Wang Lu said, Senior Sister Qianghua, you're welcome to study it clearly. Qianghua looked at Wang Lu. The latter's eyes drifted away, seemingly not interested in the wind of destruction. The woman sighed in disappointment and no longer spoke. Indeed, the wind of destruction was not the urgent problem to pay attention to now. The question was, would they really settle here for a long time? The next 2 days were uneventful. Although the new demon world was an amazing paradise, for the visitors, there was not much fun. Wang Lu and his team explored Xanarkand aimlessly, but there was still no clue on the way back to 9 regions. This kind of life could be described as a walking dead, and the only relief was the arrival of the Wind of Destruction. On the 3rd day, the Wind of Destruction came to the new demon world. In the evening, when Wang Lu was still tasting the demon race snacks in a market in Xanarkand, a mournful horn resounded through the sky. The source of the sound came from the 9th sky. According to ABA, it was a warning from the great sage of the demon race in the central city. After hearing the horn, the rhythm of Xanarkand suddenly changed. The people on the street began to change their direction, and the merchants in the shops began to prepare to close. Of course, because all this had been going on for 2,000 years, people seemed to be in an orderly manner. Even the owner of the food stall where Wang Lu worked was not in a hurry to drive people away. He just hung up a sign that no new guests would be entertained. However, Wang Lu naturally had no appetite, so he hurriedly ate and returned to his residence. When night fell, Xanarkand fell into a dead silence. This city was usually a city that never sleeps and was brightly lit. However, when the Wind of Destruction came, it was as quiet as a dead city without any light. Because the residents of the new demon world had been accustomed to hiding in their rooms and sleeping when the Wind of Destruction came, although in theory, as long as they were in the city, they would not be taken away by the Wind of Destruction, but after all, it was safer to do both. Moreover, even the great demon king needed to rest, and the arrival of the Wind of Destruction gave everyone a chance to rest. However, how could Wang Lu have the mood to sleep? In the living room of his residence, Wang Lu and Zhang Zai stood side by side with a smile on their faces. And in front of them, Fairy Chonghua, Zhou Mumu and Xiang Liang. All looked at these two people incredulously. Then they heard Wang Lu excitedly say, "Next, the first field investigation of the Wind of Destruction is about to begin. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."